Rules Committee will come to order, and thank you very much. I'm delighted that we're gathered together in a brand new year with a new opportunity ahead of us. We've had a chance to welcome each other. We have two new members, Doug and Steve. Welcome to the Rules Committee. My first time, I don't know about yours, Louise, but I wasn't two chairs in.
I sat in that last chair for a good while.
Okay. Me too. And you know, you got to move. That's like being in the gunner's seat.
Oh.
Every time somebody moves in and out, you got to move up and back, but it keeps you alert and awake. Well, we're delighted as we begin this new process to get started. The committee now is in order, and we're here for the adoption of committee rules and other business related to the organization of the committee for the 114th Congress. I also recognize that we have our chaplain with us today. I've asked the chaplain.
He is looking for trouble.
No, I don't think it's trouble, but that grin on his face. I asked him if he would pray for us, and he said, "No, I'm here to pray for you." And that's an old term from years ago, but he is here to pray. I think for all of us, Father. Yes, but Father, we're delighted that you're here, and I noticed that he sits at the right hand of me, not at me at the right hand of the Father. But here we go, and I'm delighted that we're here today. I want to let us know that I am hopeful that this committee, while we have some new members, will recognize that what we're attempting to accomplish is the people's business. We're here to make sure that what we do, that we try and be forthright about, that we try and look each other in the eye. I recognize I have a job, and I know the gentlewoman from New York has a job. We represent perhaps two ideas, two different ways of getting things done. She is a Democrat and I'm a Republican. But we have an obligation to work also in the best interest of the American people. We have an obligation to listen to people back home. We have an obligation to speak forthrightly about that which we represent. And I believe we have an obligation to the institution. We have an obligation to make sure that we are speaking with each other with clarity, but also as with congeniality, as colleagues. This committee, not unlike the others, but perhaps more so, is on 24-hour call. We have to be available to move the House. We're institutionalists. We're people that understand what we're doing matters, and that a lot of people are looking to us for guidance and to move forward. There have been a number of comments which we will take up later about how we talk to each other, how we address our witnesses, time frames, and moving through to get our work done. But today is not for that. Today is an opportunity for us to formally put in place the committee to make sure that we understand and are listening to each other and moving forward. And that is my opening statement. I'd like to yield to the gentlewoman from New York, the ranking member, for any comment she'd like to make. Gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much, Mr. Chairman. And before I begin, I wanted to say that both you and I are blessed with incredible staffs. We have great affection for yours, as I'm sure you do for mine, and the staff works extremely hard. So we're glad to be back under the tutelage of Miles and Hugh. They really get some great work done. We thank you for that. I also want to take a moment to say that I look forward always to the beginning of a new term full of promise and hope, and we want to welcome our new members from the majority. It's nice to have them, and for everybody who's moved up here a bit, too, we were just saying it took us a long time to jump those many seats, Burgess, so congratulations on that. Yeah. We've got a rich history here on this Rules Committee. We on the minority side welcome all of you. We're eager to join together in the legislative process. Now, every 2 years we have an opportunity to start anew with a new Congress, and this committee, as the chairman has said, plays an integral part in the process of what happens in the House of Representatives. So before we begin, I've got to get this out of the way. I want to mention two numbers to my colleagues, the numbers 83 and 97. Now, 83 is the number of closed rules the committee approved in the last Congress, which shut almost all of us out. That's the most closed rules of any Congress in history. That means that most members don't even get to participate in the process of Congress that harms our institution and our country. Let me give you a sense of the magnitude of that number. In 2013, this committee approved more closed rules in a single week than the entire final year under Democrat control. So let me say that again. More closed rules in 1 week than an entire year under Democrat control. We want to have better opportunity to work than that. We can do better, and we don't have to repeat that record. We can start anew. The second number is 97. That's the percentage of waivers that this committee granted to Republicans in the last Congress, 97. Of the 181 times the committee allowed a member to violate rules, 97% of them were Republican members. Let me put it another way. In the last Congress, Democrats had to abide by the rules. Republicans didn't. It shouldn't be that way, and it doesn't have to be that way. We can do better. Now, there are 2 new empty chairs at the end of the day, so I must say that I have great respect and affection for our 2 colleagues who are no longer there, and I wish them well in their new committee assignments. And we are all looking forward, as I said before, to work with the new members and certainly with the chair. And it's my fervent hope that the new Congress will bring back an era of willingness to tackle big problems that face our nation, a renewed call for true bipartisanship, a culture of enlivened debate. In no other committee will we see so clearly the fruits of those changes. I hope we can join together to prioritize the American people and set partisanship aside. And so with those words, I say I'm happy to be back, happy to see all of my colleagues, and hope for a wonderful term coming. And my best to you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Slaughter, thank you very much. We will not only accept your feedback, but recognize that we all need to work, including myself, that I need to make sure that I'm down at your office speaking with you, that I'm forthright about what we're going to do and how we're going to do things. And the gentlewoman knows up to and including an opportunity for us to try and look at the same problems that we've got to accomplish together.
What I most want is for us to be able to participate fully as duly elected members from our districts, to be able to speak for the people that we represent and to have input on the legislation.
Yes,
and I really look forward to doing that, and we will certainly do our part.
Yes,
on this side. We are committed to it.
Yes, ma'am. It's my hope, and we're all in different circumstances, but the American people have now made a decision about who will run the Senate. And I view that for us to be seen well, the House, by the American people, a lot of people probably in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, 9th grade take a history class, and they learn the House does something and the Senate does something. Doesn't have to be the same, and then they get together for a conference, but they're willing to tackle the biggest issues, willing to tackle them, even if it's a vote that goes the wrong way to a person. And when we had 350 pieces of legislation that ended up in the Senate without a return volley, it created a circumstance for the American people and up here, perhaps different for you than for us, but it created some things that I hope this time I can look at you honestly and tell you I think we will be able to work better on our side so that we can get our work to the Senate and then get something back. That's not meant to diminish anybody. It's just, as you said, a new time.
And we want to take advantage of that. On the way over, I was happy to see 12 little children from the daycare center at the Smithsonian, and looking at those faces, they're so excited to be here. And it does renew our absolute commitment to do our best for the future citizens.
Well,
people who will sit here in the future.
Yeah, that, and we have some, I don't know the exact number, some 57 new members of Congress who come in here with the expectation of performance, and they look to this committee, among others, to be able to effectively allow them to have debate too. So I think we're starting out well.
All right. Thank you.
We're starting out well. Even Mr. Polis said he was looking forward to this year.
Oh, he's always looking forward.
Yeah.
He's our cheerful one.
We love that good cheer. We love that. We love it. Yeah. Our first order of business is the adoption of the committee rules for the 114th Congress. The chair will be in receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina, the vice chairman of the committee, Mrs. Fox. Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the Rules Committee adopt the chairman's proposed committee rules for the 114th Congress.
The proposed changes include, consistent with HRES 5, an update to the truth and testimony requirements for non-governmental witnesses to include payments or contracts from foreign governments in required disclosure, and one change that conforms to the long-standing committee practice and additional technical changes. So without objection, the proposed rules will be considered as read and open for amendment. Is there any discussion or amendment? The gentleman from Massachusetts recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple amendments. My first amendment is designated number 1. And this amendment would simply require us to tell the public how many emergency meetings we've held and how many times we've used a closed rule to block all members from offering amendments so far this Congress. Last Congress was the most closed Congress in history, with 83 entirely closed rules. And I think we have to do better, and I know there are people on your side who think we ought to do better. Since we keep these records anyway, why not make the tally of closed rules available to the public as we go along? Over 1/3 of our meetings were emergencies last Congress. Here's just one example of legislation so essential and time-sensitive that apparently we couldn't wait 1 or 2 more days to hold a non-emergency meeting. H.R. 935, amending the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. I don't think that raised to the level of an emergency. And I think what we're just hoping is that maybe with some more transparency and with a reporting requirement, that maybe some of my friends on the other side might think twice before we rush into emergency meetings and before we move headlong with more and more closed rules. So I would urge the committee to adopt this amendment, and I urge an aye vote.
I appreciate the discussion, gentleman's amendment. Is there discussion? A gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I understand it, we already do keep these records. We notify everybody when we have an emergency meeting. It's on our website. The rules are designated whether or not they're closed. It's, again, easily available publicly. We all know that both sides keep track of this. As my friend from New York pointed out, we all have very capable and expert staffs here. And so the information is available. And frankly, my friends, quite often and legitimately, I have no problem with it, point this out. I don't think anybody on our side has ever said their information is inaccurate. I know it's not, because I think their staff is, again, very proficient in providing it. So to me, it's just sort of make work. I don't see the purpose behind it, with all due respect to my friend from Massachusetts.
Well, I appreciate the comment. We don't necessarily keep them cumulatively, so it's not always easy for the public who are following to be able to figure out how many closed rules, how many emergency meetings we've had. And I don't see how it's make work. It's just basically adding numbers. I mean, how hard is it to, keep a tally saying that we're now on the 83rd closed rule, or we're on the 52nd emergency meeting? That's not an onerous requirement. We're not just going to do extensive research, but I think it's an attempt to highlight the fact. I mean, and I think this applies no matter who's in charge. I think it's an attempt to try to remind those who are in control of this House the direction in which they are taking this House. And I just think that, again, I go back to when Speaker Boehner first became Speaker and promised the most open, transparent Congress in history, and in fact we got the opposite. And I think that maybe if we are compelled to remind ourselves every meeting we have a running tally. Maybe we might think twice.
Well, reclaiming my time, I mean, to my friend's point, we can all recite, a litany of things that have been promised or said that sometimes don't happen. I mean, my friends ended for a year or 2 years the process of open rules on appropriations. Didn't even bring the bills to the floor. Didn't bring open rules to the floor, which is, we've done multiple times, and I don't think we've ever brought a closed approach bill other than the ledge branch, which we both agreed to close and negotiate the amendments, on both sides. So, again, the information's available. I see no need to keep recording it. If my friends want to make that point, they are certainly free to do so. I've never found them in error when they make it. I failed to see the reason to do work which is essentially duplicative. Yield back.
Jim yields back his time. I will weigh in on this also. I will tell you that I don't know that this exactly hits the point, but we all live in glass houses. The majority, whether it is Speaker Boehner or Speaker Pelosi, or whether it's Mrs. Slaughter as chairman of the committee, or whether it's David Dreyer or Pete Sessions, we all have business that has to be done. And I don't think there's any attempt to try and hide or not provide information. When we say we're having an emergency meeting, it says it on the notice, we're having an emergency meeting. But let's retort back with also facts. Under Speaker Pelosi and Chairwoman Slaughter, in the 111th Congress of the Rules Committee held 67 emergency meetings. 67. They did happen, and they do happen, and it's a matter of the course of the business that we have up here. And 12 instances where emergency measures were added to a regularly scheduled meeting. That's because there was new work that had to be done. In the 113th, I called 27 emergency meetings, and we considered 7 items as additional emergency measures. That means that what we did is when we added something new, we had to use that designation. But many of the times it was about normal and regular types of activities. So I just want us to understand that there may be a 6th grade class that's listening out there and think, oh my gosh, this guy Pete Sessions is doing things way different than the tradition. It's part of the nature of the business. And so I forthrightly accept what you're saying, but some counterbalance, it's also part of the nature of the beast.
Well, with respect, I think what we're trying to do is change the nature of the business. And I think there are a lot of members on both sides of the aisle who would like a more open process, who would like to be able to participate more directly in debate on the floor and be able to offer amendments. And with the record number of closed rules, they are not able to do that. And if we take over the House in 2 years, which I hope we do, this would apply to the Democrats if they are in control. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, I understand what business as usual is. What we're trying to argue for is, a different kind of business as usual, one that is more inclusive and one that embraces a more deliberative process. So I would urge my colleagues to vote yes on this amendment.
Thank you very much. And one additional comment. Business as usual is not what I referred to. What I referred to is the needs of the business. And sometimes the needs of the business dictate differently. I think we've now had further discussion available to the committee. We'll now have a vote on the McGovern amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. Noes have it. Gentlewoman asked for a recorded vote.
Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox? No. Mr. Cole? No. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? No. Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Collins, no. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings?
Aye.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis?
Aye.
Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion?
I have one additional amendment.
Jump is recognized.
It's designated amendment number 2. And my amendment says that if we're going to let so many members break the rules of the House, we should be transparent about how often we do it and be upfront about how it's almost always for Republicans. As Ranking Member Slaughter pointed out just a couple of minutes ago, of the 181 waivers granted by this committee last Congress, 175 of them were for Republicans. That's 97% for Republicans, 3% for Democrats. Again, in the last Congress, Democrats had to abide by the rules. Republicans did not. Let me give you an example because it happened to me. I've had an amendment that I've tried to offer many times to try to eliminate tax breaks for big oil companies. And every time I've tried to get a vote on an energy bill, I've been told, sorry, the tax rule says you can only do this, you only can do that on a tax bill. Then when I've tried to offer it on a tax bill, I've been told, sorry, the germaneness rule says you can only offer it on an energy bill. It's a farce. And I think the majority is kind of just hiding behind the rules to keep members from voting on any idea that you don't like. And, you know, I kind of have an old-fashioned definition of rules. You know, I was taught that when you have rules, you're supposed to follow them. And given the number of waivers that this committee has provided to get around the rules, I think that the public we ought to begin transparent about that. My hope is that, the same with the previous amendment, is that if you're required to report these things, then maybe you might think twice about doing it so often, or maybe be a little bit more balanced in how you do it. And so this isn't about whether Democrats did it when they were in charge or, you know, versus Republicans. It's simply, again, we're trying to change the nature of the way we do business around here to have a more open and transparent process. So no matter who's in charge, members have a chance to participate more and be able to offer good, constructive ideas. And again, going back to what Speaker Bannon promised when he first became Speaker, to have every good idea have the ability to be debated and voted on before the full House. So I'd urge my colleagues to vote aye on this.
Further discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Again, just to point out, number one, we do make this information available. It's, you know, specified. Number two, we actually do it now much better than we used to in terms of listing the specific waivers. That was not done. My friend will go back, he'll check when they were in the majority, they used the blanket waiver repeatedly. Number three, I'm not surprised that in a Republican majority House, it's mostly Republican bills to get to the floor. I was on this committee years ago when we were in the majority. I lost my seat when we moved to the minority, appropriately so, because our number of spots was reduced. And in that interim, I was up here a number of times, and I always got a warm reception from my colleagues, but I never got any of my amendments approved, not one. So, again, that's partly the nature of being in the majority in this particular institution. That's our rules. So I think, number one, we're pretty transparent about it. Number two, we do report the number of waivers annually. You know, we tally them, and that's public data. We do offer much more specificity than we ever have in the past. And, again, this seems to me work that's pretty duplicative. If my friends want to make the point, again, they've got access to the same information we do. They've got a superb staff, and those statistics are readily available. So, again, I just don't see any need for this particular amendment, with all due respect to my friend.
Well, and I appreciate the gentleman's comments, but again, we're trying to make it easier for the general public to know what goes on in this committee, and for the general public to kind of have a cumulative number, they would have to read every single committee report and go through, you know, countless pages to try to figure that out. Again,
I'm sorry.
I guess my point here, and I think, you know, this is a question for all of us, you know, whether or not we're satisfied with the process that we have been operating under, you know, whether we're satisfied with business as usual, where important ideas get blocked, where there isn't time for the kind of deliberative process that I think most members thought that they could get when they came here, whether we're fine with that, or whether we want to kind of move to a different approach. And I guess what we're trying to simply say is that maybe it's time, you know, to try things a little bit differently. I would argue with you that some of these bills that died in the United States Senate, you know, that you cite all the time, you know, maybe if we had a more open process over here on some of those bills, where members could have more opportunity to debate some of their ideas and amend the bills, we might have come up with some more compromises that might have actually had a chance over in the Senate. But in any event, again, this is about whether you want a more open process, a more transparent process, whether you believe the public should have easy access to these numbers or not. And I think we should vote yes on this.
Well, with all due respect, reclaiming my time to my friend, again, I would make the point, number one, I think I'll make a prediction now, which I'm usually shy about doing. I think a lot more of these bills will get heard in the United States Senate this time. I think it's under new management, and we'll see a very different approach, and I think that's all for the good. In terms of what we do here,
let me just say,
let me finish my point. I'll be happy to yield back time to you just shortly. But we do keep records of these things. We do make them available. We have been more transparent on waivers and more specific than anybody else. My friends keep track of this, as they should, and it's perfectly their right to do this anyway. So, again, I just fail to see the need to create more paperwork, to create, more time spent. I just don't see the necessity of it. So with that, I certainly yield to my friend.
Well, first of all, it takes absolutely no time, and I can't imagine this being a burden on anybody in terms of reporting this in a cumulative way. But secondly, the gentleman mentioned, well, he expects that it'll be a lot easier to get some of these Republican bills, heard on the Senate side. I have no doubt about that. The question is whether or not we're going to actually accomplish anything. And for that, I think you need a more open process where there's more give and take between the two parties, where Democrats actually have a voice, because whether you like it or not, we have a Democratic president. And so it's not going to be my way or the highway. If you're going to see some of these bills become law, it's going to require some give and take. And that would argue for a more open and transparent process.
Reclaiming my time, to the gentleman's point, it's fair to note I did not vote for the president in either of his two successful elections, but I certainly respect the President of the United States and understand that he won those elections fair and square, and he represents the majority of people in terms of having won the popular vote twice in a row, by the way. First time anybody's done that since Eisenhower, broken 50%. So I respect that a great deal. And I would also point out, again, for the record, on most of the compromises that have come here, I have voted for them, quite often in the minority of my own party. I don't recall my friends, when they were in the majority, ever putting a bill on the floor that a majority of their members opposed. I've seen our Speaker, and working through this committee, do that multiple times, frankly, trying to reach compromise. The Speaker did that on Violence Against Women Act. He did that on Sandy relief. He did that on reopening the government. He did that on fiscal cliff. That stuff came through here. With all due respect to my friends, I don't think they could point to anything remotely similar in terms of trying to work across the aisle. I think the Speaker has tried to do that. But at the end of the day, again, this just seems to me unnecessarily redundant. Again, as my friend points out, the statistics are readily available anyway, and each side puts them out, and I don't recall us ever disputing the accuracy of you when you've pointed something out. Again, I respect your staff every bit as much as I respect our staff on our side of the aisle. I fail to see the need. So
I get that.
Certainly you'll.
I guess I don't understand what the big deal is. If it's so easily available, which I think to the general public it isn't, but just stating the fact. And the second thing I just point out, just for the record, is before we throw too many bouquets at the Speaker and the leadership on the Violence Against Women Act and the Hurricane Sandy issue, any kind of compromise came after the leadership here tried to torpedo those bills, and they were absolutely necessary, especially the Hurricane Sandy relief, which I remember that debate very, very vividly. But look, if you don't want to vote for this, fine. But again, I think if we're trying to change the nature of this process, and we want something more open, then this is not a big deal. It's just simply reporting the facts, and I get it.
With all due respect to my friend, if it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal, and I don't know why we need to do it. And in terms of, I'm going to differ with you a little bit in terms of, if the leadership, whoever's in the majority, wants to veto something, I've seen my friends do it when they had the majority. Ours is capable of doing it too. I actually would disagree with my friend. Those were efforts where the Speaker was trying to solve a problem and work in a bipartisan fashion, and I was very happy, quite frankly, to work with my friends who supported that legislation, and look forward to having other opportunities to do that going forward. But this case, I just, with all due respect to my friend, don't think it's a necessary amendment. So yield back.
Further discussion. I would just add just a couple pieces. One of them is that on a regular basis, we had Republicans and Democrats bring bills to us, in particular with appropriations, where both the members, Republicans and Democrats, were in favor of the legislation. They're closed rule with that. Republicans and Democrats, before they came here, back in the committee process, worked together, worked out the differences, included the ideas. And then I remember being on the floor when we kept count the same way you're talking about taking count. And every time we did a rule, I would say, and this is your 23rd closed rule. Mrs. Slaughter, Mr. Hastings, Judge Hastings, does those same things. So if the public is aware of that on a rule-by-rule basis. I think we've discussed this enough. I now call the vote. Those in favor of the McGovern Amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
Noes have it.
That's for
Gentlewoman asked for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox? No. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, no. Ms. Slaughter? Yes. Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings?
Aye.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis?
Aye.
Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The motion is not agreed to. Amendment is not agreed to. Further discussion.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman from
Mr. Chairman,
Florida's
I have an
recognized.
amendment designated number 3, but before I proceed, I'd like to, and I'm sure it must have been done already, welcome 2 new members to the Rules Committee, Mr. Stivers and Mr. Collins, and to say to them that this is like the Hotel California song. There's only one way in and no way out, and you still have time if you trust me. About 2 or 3 months from now, you're gonna say Al-C was right. Okay,
Gentleman yield.
Yes.
Have you been talking to Mrs. Fox?
No, I have not.
I hear this from Mrs. Fox 4 or 5 times a day.
All right,
I yield back my time.
Gentleman yield again?
as they say, I'm just saying.
Gentleman yield again?
But, yes, I will.
I just want to associate myself with my good friend's remark.
But certainly with Mr. Collins coming on as a chaplain and with our house chaplain here, I would just have him know there are going to be a lot of times when I'm going to remind him about Matthew. I'll just leave it at that. The amendment that I offer, Mr. Chairman, requires the majority to notify the House when we will be considering legislation under a closed rule, where no member has a chance to offer an amendment. Right now, what we do is notify everyone when we are going to restrict a rule. I just pulled up one, for example, the American Energy Infrastructure Act that we dealt with back in June, and we notified members that they had to provide and submit a searchable electronic copy, and that there would be restrictions. Well, if we do this when there's going to be a restriction, then it seems to me, if the committee anticipates a closed rule, why not let members know this so that they don't waste time thinking that the amendment process is one where they are going to receive consideration. And if no member will be allowed to offer their own ideas, why not let them know up front? And there's an addendum to this, Mr. Chairman, and this is really for the good of the order, meaning Congress, but more specifically the Office of the Parliamentarian and the Office of Legislative Counsel. I learned yesterday that one member, most of us would know, that we see often, filed 44 pieces of legislation on yesterday. That's a member's prerogative. But I have not, other than sought additional space for them when we were in the majority, meaning the legislative staff, and being vitally concerned about them as well as those people that do the reporting for us here, it would seem as a practical matter that we would encourage members to try to be as serious as possible and not burden that office with a plethora of amendments that are going nowhere fast. And under that aegis, then it would seem to me that we would be very wise if we were to allow, when we are going to have a closed rule, that we let members know that. I might add, it would take some of the burden off of us. We are up here in this committee as much or more than most members in other committees. And sometimes we are here, most of us know there's going to be a closed rule, and people come up here with stacks of amendments, and we are hearing them, and it's time-consuming. It's also hurtful. And I also make my additional appeal about being cognizant of the fact that the members that serve on this committee at some point, when their amendments are germane and reasonable, should be given some priority consideration so that their ideas might be heard. I like being here with all of you, but I think that this is an efficiency mechanism that will benefit us and the institution, and I would at this time yield.
Further discussion. I want to thank the gentleman for his ideas. I think I operate off a different mechanism, and that is that I have encouraged Republicans and Democrats to come to this committee to express their ideas. And a good number of the issues that we handle on a regular basis are tax-related. They're tax-related when our friends the Democrats are in charge. They're the same when Republicans. And those, if you do not carefully understand that, and I know you do, and I do, but not every member does, you get into the tax code. So that's why another reason why we have closed rules. But the facts of the case are real simple, and that is I would like for people even to not know necessarily ahead of time that I'm not interested. And I think that I'm interested, and I think the gentleman knows me. He knows that I'm willing to listen to people. Sometimes there are people on my committee that say I allow too much content. But I don't think it's good to say don't come. And I think that would be a don't come, we're not open for business. So I don't chastise the gentleman at all. I think his ideas are sound. I just have a different perspective. And I respect the gentleman, and the gentleman knows, because you've come further with me and I've come with you, Alcee, over these years, sure, and really developed a great friendship. And part of it is over listening to each other. Mm-hmm. Further discussion? Seeing none, the vote now be on. Excuse me, yeah, gentleman's recognized.
No, but I think the gentleman has a good amendment here, and I think I don't think he was suggesting that people should be dissuaded from coming here. People want to come here and sit here for hours to wait to testify. That's their right to do. But some people come here and they sit for hours when it's already been predetermined that there's going to be a closed rule, but they don't know about it. They have other things to do. They can meet with their constituents. They could be at other committee hearings. But there are people who come here thinking that, everything's on the level, that no decision has been made when a decision has been made, and they spend their entire day here. We do it because that's our job. But I think what the gentleman is saying here is if people want to come here, they can come here. But, but they might not come here and waste an entire day if they know that there's no chance of making their amendment in order to begin with. So I think it's a common sense amendment that the gentleman has offered.
Gentleman makes a good point in support of the gentleman from Florida, and I appreciate the dialogue. Further discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the gentleman's amendment from Florida. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. Noes have it. Gentleman asks for a recorded vote.
Ms. Fox. No. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers. No. Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, no. Ms. Slaughter. Yes. Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern. Yes. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
Amendment's not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing excuse me, gentleman from Colorado. Mr. Cole is recognized.
Thank you. I have an amendment designated number 5. This amendment would essentially establish a single subject rule. It's a bipartisan bill over which this committee has original jurisdiction, which we're hoping to incorporate into the rule. It would essentially end the practice of these Christmas tree bills where we have multiple unrelated issues, which I feel are one of the reasons that the public has lost confidence in Congress is you'll have something relating to vastly different provisions in different areas in the same bill. Many state legislatures, including our own in Colorado, function under the single subject rule. In fact, 41 states do. It works just fine, and it provides for more transparency and accountability. And I think the members of those legislative bodies appreciate it because they can actually be for or against something rather than in the same bill have a million things in unrelated areas. There's really no reason why members shouldn't be able to know that a bill is true to its title and prevent riders that are completely unrelated content areas from being in the same bill. And in fact, I think this practice of these Christmas tree bills has only contributed to gridlock and inaction. And I think that we can do better as a legislative body. And I hope that the sentiments of this bipartisan bill can be incorporated into our rules so that we can have a single subject rule here in the Rules Committee. And I urge the committee to adopt my amendment. Yield back.
Further discussion. I appreciate and respect the gentleman for what he said. And, you know, if I take in face value exactly what you said, I would agree with you also. Except a bill is a bill and a rule is a rule. And it is not uncommon. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready in a few minutes to do exactly what you said we should not do. And that is we're going to have one rule so that we can debate this on the floor. And we're going to have 2 separate subjects. Both of those subjects were provided information to members in the appropriate time. They were on our website. They are 2 distinctly different subjects, bills, but under one rule. And I do respect what the gentleman's saying, and I'm not saying there's even a philosophic difference with what I believe, except we're trying to notice members. We're trying to make sure that the American people and the public have a chance to see them on the website. 2 distinctly different issues. We are not taking and putting them together except at the rule. So I do respect the gentleman very much.
Yeah, and the only change that this amendment would make is there would have to be 2 rules
right.
reported out, one for each, which, again, would allow members to make their decision on each rule rather than effectively being forced to make one decision in 2 different areas.
And you and I have been on the floor enough where we run through our speakers and we're done in 15 or 20 minutes normally. Not unusual. We're now going to put 2 subjects together, one rule, and I appreciate that, gentlemen. Okay, we've now discussed this. I think every member understands the gravity of what we're talking about. The vote will now be on the Pulse Amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Noes have it, noes have it.
Roll call vote, Mr.
Gentlemen,
Chair.
ask for a recorded vote.
Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Collins, no. Ms. Slaughter? Yes. Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern? Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis?
Aye.
Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk, report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment's not agreed to. Further amendment, gentleman from Colorado.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment designated number 4, which would require a CBO score when rules meets to consider a rule to ensure that before we send a bill to the floor, we know how much it costs, whether it increases or decreases the deficit. We proposed a version of this rule change before, but it's extremely important that as we are cognizant of the fiscal situation of the country, that we know the costs of bills before we send them forward here in the Rules Committee. In fact, the recent rules package adopted by the House includes a provision, as you know, to require the CBO and the Joint Committee on Taxation to use dynamic scoring, which many economists are very skeptical about. we will know, many of us feel less about the fiscal condition of our future with regard to it. And this amendment would require any measure that we take up to have a CBO score based on sound, predictable factors that economists can agree on. Doesn't rule out that there could also be a joint committee on taxation dynamic scoring, just as there have been, Mr. Chair. We've had those, the benefit of those and many other bills as well. The more information we get, the better, certainly. But to have the baseline CBO score for any bill that the House considers is an important information and data point that I think members on both sides of the aisle will want to know. And I hope that the committee will adopt my amendment. I yield back.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
I'm thinking back to Mr. McGovern's comment earlier, which I agree with, which says if we have the rules, we ought to follow them. We haven't had this rule on the books for 24 hours yet about how we're going to score bills in this institution, and this amendment would already begin to change that. I don't dispute the gentleman's premise that we ought to have scores before this committee considers bills, though what we have seen generally in the name of trying to find the kind of bipartisan agreement, the coming together that the members have been asking for, is that happens at the last minute. Sometimes we can't have that score in this committee, but we do have that score by the time it comes to the floor the next day. I would hope that the chairman would agree with the gentleman from Colorado that we ought to do everything we can to get scores here to the degree that that they are available. But if they are not available, I have never in my 4 years seen that as an effort to obfuscate budget numbers, but rather simply an issue of timing where we can't get those together. As you know, the new chairman of the Budget Committee is from the great state of Georgia. He is going to be doing everything he can to motivate the CBO to be moving forward. And while I again support the gentleman's premise, I would be opposed to handcuffing the proceedings of this committee by putting this into the committee rules. That I yield back.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the Polis amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. No. No's happy.
Roll
No's
call
happy.
vote, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox? No. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Collins, no. Ms. Slaughter?
Yes.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings?
Aye.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis?
Aye.
Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment's not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing none, this now moves us to the motion at hand from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor of the gentlewoman's motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Ayes have it. Ayes have it. The gentlewoman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, aye. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, aye. Ms. Slaughter?
No.
Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern? No. Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings?
No.
Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis?
No.
Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
The motion is agreed to. The motion is agreed to without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. We now proceed with the designation of a vice chair. Clause 2D of Rule 11 adopted by the House provides that the committee chair designate a vice chair to act on my behalf during a temporary absence. I'm sorry?
You wanted to know if I was going to be chair of What's the likelihood?
The gentlewoman from Kentucky can be called whatever she wants then.
Ranking members.
The ranking member is what I pursuant to that, I designate the gentlewoman, the Honorable Virginia Fox from Grandfather Community, North Carolina, as the Vice Chairman of the committee. It's now in order to provide for a composition subcommittee for the 114th Congress. The chair will now be in receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from Grandfather Community, North Carolina, Mrs. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pursuant to Rule 5C of the Rules Committee, I move that each of the two subcommittees during the 114th Congress shall be composed of 5 majority members and 2 minority members.
You've now heard the motion. Is there discussion or amendment to that? Seeing none, the chair will now have a vote on that. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The subcommittee size and ratio will remain the same as 113th Congress. The ratio will be 5 to 2, and we now are moving forward. With the next section, I've not been able to consult with Mrs. Slaughter on the composition. I'm not going to get into that now, but we will have a discussion between you and I about your choices of how you'd like to make that, and I will do the same, and I promise you that I will come on bended knee to you, and we'll have, as we do when we meet, and I want the gentleman to know we're not doing that at this time, but we will get that done. Approval of committee staff. Without objection, the committee on both the majority and minority committee on rules is approved, and without objection, the committee staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes to the rules reported by the committee during the duration of the 114th Congress. Without objection, the organizational meeting is now adjourned. As previously discussed with the minority, we are now going to consider H.R. 30, the Save America Workers Act of 2015, and H.R. 3, the Keystone XL Pipeline Act. So we will move from the organizational part to the task at hand today, and that is that we will move to H.R. 30, Save America Workers Act of 2015, and H.R. 3, Keystone XL Pipeline. Good morning, and I would like to welcome our new Rules Committee and our distinguished guests who we will have before us today. Some we will recognize, others we will recognize them with a beard. And in this case, two of the members who are here today have obviously been deer hunting, and I'm sure that they will be welcome and recognized by this committee. First of all, I'd like to note that H.R. 3 would approve the application of the Keystone Pipeline. The Keystone Pipeline, as we have been told publicly, would create 20,000 jobs directly as well as tens of thousands of jobs indirectly. It would also inject more than $7 billion into our economy. It would further allow us a closer relationship with our dear friends from the north, the Canadians. We would be providing goods and services back and forth, the trade of money and material, product from Canada. Our relationship with Canada, I believe, is very important, and we would ensure that further moving forward of these two great nations would happen. Consumers also would, I think, get a better deal by gaining access to reliable source of energy, and we've seen the last few weeks exactly how the free market, when allowed to operate by itself, provides consumers, including families, with an opportunity to have a product at a better price that's available to them so that they are not being gouged at the pump. And this is another example where I believe government has gotten in the way of the efficiency that could happen. The American people have waited for 6 years for this to happen. 6 years, and this new Congress is prepared to act. I believe we also have new partner, new management, as the gentleman from Oklahoma referred to, in the Senate, and I think we can get this passed by the House, by the Senate, and come to any agreement or disagreement, move it to the President's desk. The American people want and need regular energy that comes from neighbors, as opposed to some who may be using the money that we use for reasons that we do not agree with. Second bill, H.R. 30, provides our new Congress with an opportunity to protect jobs, 40-hour work week as you know it, and there are 2.6 million working-class Americans in danger of losing wages as a direct result of President Obama's 30-hour work week contained within the Affordable Care Act. This legislation will help restore the 40-hour work week, protect workers. I want to thank, certainly, Chairman Ryan, Paul Ryan, a gentleman from Wisconsin who will welcome my Dallas Cowboys to Lambeau Field this weekend. I've been real careful not to shoot my mouth off to the young chairman, but I hope that we have better weather than we did in 1967.
It's going to warm up to about 18 degrees, they think.
1967, you were not very nice to my Cowboys with
the
weather. And also we have other people who will be here, including the gentleman, Mr. Young, and certainly Mr. Levin, who are here and prepared to give the testimony. And I would defer to any opening statement that the minority may make at this time. Does Mr. McGovern seek that time?
Mr. Chairman, just for the sake of time, I just ask unanimous consent that the remarks that I made in opposition to these measures several times last year be Xeroxed and submitted to the record. I yield back my time.
Without objection, the gentleman's comments will be included, and certainly a crack member of the staff is here and able to do that with our stenographer, and the will be provided to her, and they will be in the notes. I want to thank the gentleman. Mr. Levin, welcome back to the Rules Committee. We're delighted that you're here. Mr. Ryan, Mr. Young, both of you have an opportunity to not only speak forthrightly about the thoughts and ideas that you have, but we are delighted that you are here, and I would defer. It's my understanding that this is the gentleman from Indiana's bill. I would defer to the gentleman first to author that bill. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great to be here. I would yield to the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee with your permission.
No problem at all. I want to make sure that both of you have.
Appreciate that, Chairman. What I'd like to do, if it's okay with the chairman, is just do an opening statement. I have Ways and Means pending business I've got to get to as well.
I recognize
and
that.
And then I want to turn over my role to.
Without objection, anything that either of you have right will be.
Gentleman from Indiana. Yeah, the gentleman from it's his bill. He's a member of the Ways and Means Committee.
Gentleman's recognized.
All right, thank you, Chairman. First of all, the first firm step on the ladder of opportunity. It's a full-time job. And for too many Americans, this step is moving out of reach. And one of the reasons why this step is moving out of reach is because of the Affordable Care Act. Right now, the law says that every large employer must give health insurance to its full-time employees, and it defines full-time as 30 hours or more. So what's happening? Well, businesses are cutting workers' hours. They're keeping them below 30 hours to avoid the penalty. What's more, community colleges, they're cutting their professors' hours, so they have to cut their class offerings. Every single one of us, I bet, has had stories from employers in their districts. I've had dozens where they're telling us about in preparation for this mandate, they're cutting their workers from full-time down to part-time. We call them 29ers. It's something that is used by employers these days, knocking people down to 29 hours. This is running through our economy, and it is depriving people of all who need it the most, this ladder of economic opportunity, getting a full-time job. I couldn't think of a worse way to support working families, taking opportunities away from them. Who are the people who are most at risk with this rule? Well, by and large, they are young people in low-wage jobs, probably their first jobs. One study says that over half of them have at most a high school degree. These are the people who are just getting started in life, who need those extra hours, who want to move up this ladder of opportunity. And the Affordable Care Act is holding them down. That's why we're here today. This bill changes the law's definition of full-time back to 40 hours a week, the way that most people define full-time, the way that decades of employment practice have defined full-time. That way, businesses will no longer fear letting their employees work a full week. That way, people can get the experience that they need. That way, we can get people working again to build a healthy economy. So we just think this is just really a no-brainer to helping make sure that people can get the full-time work that they need and to prevent this trend. And the employer mandate hasn't even kicked in yet. To prevent this trend from occurring where we're knocking people out of full-time work down to 29 hours. It's something that's happening throughout this economy. It's depriving people who need this economic opportunity. And I ask the committee for their full consideration. And I apologize, but I have to leave to attend other Ways and Means business. I'd like to turn over my time to the author of the bill, a member of the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Young from Indiana.
Mr. Ryan, thank you very much. Without objection, we're going to allow Mr. Ryan, who has been here for a good bit of time, to go ahead and go and attend his duties. And I want to thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. Did you have anything in writing that you wanted to leave for the committee? Without objection. Without objection. Thank you very much. I thank gentleman. Gentleman is now excused from the committee. Gentleman, the author of the bill, Mr. Young, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't pretend that I might improve upon the opening statement of the chairman. I think he pretty well summarized the legislation. I'd be happy to take any questions from members of this committee. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Levin, welcome. We're delighted that you're here today, and the gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
And to you too, sir.
A few new members of the committee, a few who've been around. Glad to join you again. I want to talk about the substance. I just want to say a word about the atmosphere around here. There's been a lot of talk about finding common ground, about working together. And I think that is useful language. The problem is the test isn't the words, but the test are the actions taken. And bringing up this bill tomorrow is contradictory to the notion that our objective is to seek common ground. What this bill does, instead of seeking common ground on this issue, essentially it's adopting a scorched earth approach. You all know if this bill were ever to pass, it would be vetoed. You know that. And the President today, the White House has issued a new statement of administration policy, but it's not new. And the end of it says, and this isn't just advisors saying it, if the President were presented with H.R. 30, he would veto it. And the administration policy sets out why. So let me talk about the substance, though I think it's also important to remember the words that have been put forth these last 24 hours about trying to find common ground. This goes in the opposite direction. This doesn't save American workers. It hurts American workers. The administration starts off by saying this: the administration strongly opposes House passage of H.R. 30, the Save American Workers Act, because it would significantly increase the deficit, reduce the number of Americans with employer-based health insurance coverage, and create incentives for employers to shift their employees to part-time work, causing the problem it intends to solve. And that's because 5 or 6 times as many people are working 40 hours than 30. So if you move the requirement from 30 to 40, essentially what you're doing is creating an incentive for more people to be shifted to part-time work. And that's why we also have today the new statement from the Congressional Budget Office. So let me just read a few portions of it. The administration policy refers to it in the Statement of Administration Policy, but they refer to that analysis of some months ago. This is the new one that has just been issued. And I quote from it. Specifically, if H.R. 30 were enacted, it says was enacted, CBO and joint tax estimate that in the years after 2015, Insurance coverage would change in the following ways relative to CBO's current line projections. Roughly 1 million fewer people would enroll in employment-based coverage. Between 500,000 and 1 million people, more people would obtain coverage through an exchange, Medicaid, or CHIP, and fewer than 500,000 additional people would be uninsured. That means more or less 500,000 additional people would become uninsured. And it continues. CBO and Joint Tax estimate that H.R. 30 would result in net budgetary cost to the federal government of $53.2 billion over 2015 to 2025. That projected increase in federal deficits over the 11-year period consists of $31.8 billion net reduction in revenues and a $21.4 billion net increase in direct spending. You know, to call this what it does is really kind of 1984-ish. And it's interesting that it's not only so-called progressives or liberals who talk about this, but also conservatives. I want to just read comments in the National Review by Yuval Levin, who's a conservative. This article says popular with House Republicans. He says, in quotes, putting the cutoff for the employer mandate at 40 hours would likely put far, far more people at risk of having their hours cut than leaving it at 30 hours. That would make for a worse effect on workers and the economy. So by setting the definition lower, Obamacare's architects were trying to mitigate the damaging effects of the employer mandate, some, and by setting it higher, Republicans would be worsening these effects. And then the article goes on to quote Bill Kristol, I quote, I don't see why Republicans should be taking the lead in an alleged fix of Obamacare that I'm sure wouldn't improve it anyway. So what this bill essentially will do is create more part-time employees, will create more people who have no insurance whatsoever, and would have more people go into the exchange to receive insurance or receive insurance through Medicaid and CHIP, thereby, according to this new analysis, increasing the deficit by $53.2 billion. So you're hurting workers, you're creating more part-time employment, and you're increasing the deficit. That's a double or triple whammy. If you don't like ACA, do as you've tried to many times, just attack it directly. The statistics indicate that ACA is working. It isn't working perfectly, but it's working in important ways for millions of people who've never had health insurance, of all ages. So I guess you're determined to stay on this course. You're going to bring up this bill, I guess, because some within your ranks would like it. But I just want to close by emphasizing the thought was we would start this Congress on a different foot. Instead of people essentially, some would say, kicking each other around. I don't think that's quite accurate. There are issues involved. But still, instead of trying to find common ground, tomorrow you bring up this bill that's going to have strong Democratic opposition, that if it ever were to pass, would be vetoed, and the veto would be sustained. It would be sustained. So why are you doing it? When you hurt workers and you hurt the deficit. I don't know what it will take to dissuade you. I'm afraid, and this is sad, nothing. But it's a mistake. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Mr. Courtney, welcome. I'm sorry, as you walked in, I should have tried to get your attention, but to get you to the table, we're delighted that you're here today. And I don't know how many times you've been up here over the last 15 or 18 years, probably not very often. And so I want to make sure that today we recognize you. You have open content that you're here to talk about. We're very delighted that you're here. Your ideas are important to us. Anything that you have in writing that you wish to enter to the record will, without objection, will be accepted. And if I could get you to pull that microphone closer to you, the green light, I think it is, should be on, and the gentleman's right.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a member who's only been here 8 years, I haven't had a chance over the last 16
Well,
or
we
18
hope
years.
you do well enough to get invited back.
Thank you. I have appeared a couple times, and again, to all of you, I am sort of in awe of your endurance. This is a tough committee, and this is tough work. So thank you for the welcome, and to the ranking member as well. Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment which, again, was distributed according to your rules earlier today, and I will submit an additional document as part of my remarks here.
That'll be fine.
The amendment, I think, is focused on what I think is the good advice of the Congressional Research Service in terms of dealing with this issue. And in a nutshell, the problem that I think exists in terms of this cutoff, in terms of the employer mandate, is not the definition of 30 hours versus 40 hours, but the fact that there's a cliff. The way the Senate designed this employer mandate is it exempted small employers up to 49 in terms of any tax or requirement to provide health insurance. But when you hire the 50th employee, then you are taxed for 20 employees. And that's a cliff. I mean, it's undeniably a cliff. Those who supported it or argued that that was the better design will say that it was to create an incentive for the employer to provide health insurance. But there is no question that that's not a sort of marginal incremental phase-in of a tax. It is a cliff. And Mr. Young's bill, which again, I think he's trying to address some concerns that I think all of us have heard from employers, both in the public and private sector, regarding this issue. In my opinion, unfortunately, just shifts the cliff from 30 hours to 40 hours, but it leaves the cliff intact. My amendment, frankly, addresses the cliff itself by increasing the exemption to 50 employees in a firm so that when that 51st employee is hired, that you're only taxed for one worker. And that smooths out the tax burden that the Senate created when they designed the bill. Again, I have a letter which I brought with me here today. The small business majority endorses this measure because they, I think, understand that, in fact, that's the problem that's here. And in fact, yesterday, when we voted to do the hiring for heroes, if you look at what we voted on there, we actually added an exemption to the calculation of the 49 employees. We added veterans who get their benefits through TRICARE and the VA system, a totally appropriate piece of legislation which probably everybody in the room here voted for. And I think that is sort of instructive because it really points to the fact that really that was the issue that employers needed help with, not really the definition between 30 and 40. And again, I think Sandy's recitation of analysis that shows that really there's a higher cluster of employees around 40 hours than 30 hours is absolutely on target. And by the way, the Congressional Research Service, when they did their analysis back in April, made precisely that point. And if I could just, again, very briefly read that excerpt on that point, which, again, this is an August 6th report here, and I'm going to find it here. Okay. Changing the cutoff from 30 hours per week to 40 hours per week would not eliminate the incentive for employers to shift more workers to part-time status and could actually provide a greater incentive for firms not to offer health insurance to their employees. And again, the reason is because, as Sandy pointed out, the analysis shows there's just more people in this country that work closer to 40 hours a week than 30 hours a week. So again, my amendment, I think, is really a good faith attempt to try and deal with this issue, which the small business majority agrees with, to really address what is the real problem, which is the incentive, which the cliff creates, and which yesterday we partially fixed for veterans. I think we should go the whole hog and really, again, exempt out the first 49 employees in all firms, which would create a true small business exemption from the law's requirements. So again, I have the letter from the small business majority, which I'd be happy to leave with the clerk and distribute to the members, and hopefully get your favorable consideration. And with that, I yield back.
Mr. Courtney, thank you very much. In fact, you being here is important, and we had a discussion earlier, about an hour ago, about how important it is for you to come to the committee, notwithstanding how we might deal with this issue, for you to come forth, for you to speak forthrightly about what you believe, and perhaps bring issues and ideas that we might not have heard if you did not appear. So I'd like to reinforce how important it is for you to be here, how important it is for you to bring the data and information, for you to leave it for us, just as Mr. Young comes as a member of the committee and understands these things and brings his ideas too. So I want to thank you for doing this. My first question would be to the gentleman, Mr. Young. We've heard about impact and how many people. I've read a good bit of your information as I was preparing for today. Can you clarify or offer any clarification to the things that have been discussed today about the real impact?
I can indeed. It's wonderful to be here with my esteemed colleagues, and I particularly thank Mr. Courtney for offering what I think are intended to be constructive suggestions about how we can improve our nation's health care laws in a bipartisan way. I think any characterization of proposals to try and improve our nation's health care laws in a bipartisan way, as the statement of administration policy has put it, to stop fighting old political battles, I think that's the wrong way to look at this. These are serious policy issues impacting our constituents. As Mr. Courtney indicated, we've all heard stories about people having their hours dropped, whether they're substitute teachers, whether they're adjunct professors, small business employees, cafeteria workers, and so forth. A couple of clarifications with respect to facts that were presented. Less than 500,000 insured persons, according to what was, additional people will be uninsured, according to CBO, according to this, yet at a cost of roughly $55 billion in foregone wages. So I haven't done the math. I'll allow it to my colleagues to do the math, a little division there, and indicate whether this is a well-targeted provision for that less than 500,000 individuals who can become insured. I would invite my colleagues to work together in a bipartisan way so that we can ensure that demographic in a more cost-effective, sustainable way. Another thing I think bears emphasizing is the different nature of someone who's working between, say, 30 hours and 34.4 hours, which is the current average work week in this country, and people above that threshold, particularly our full-time employees, as has been traditionally understood, 40 hours or more per week. The service sector over the past 8 years has averaged between, actually it's 32.9 hours and 33.4 hours. And these individuals could lose 5 to 10 hours per week to get them under that 30-hour threshold. That really eats into the wages, the take-home pay of this demographic. In contrast, people working over 40 hours, the claim that more of them don't have health insurance than people working between 34 and 39 hours implies that employers aren't currently offering health insurance to that group of individuals. Whereas, in fact, 88% of full-time workers are eligible for health insurance, and the number one reason why some of those individuals do not have health insurance is they decline it when offered by the employer. So I think that bears remembering as well. In the end, we're talking about hourly workers here. This is an issue of fairness, a word we hear a lot about around here. This is not politics. It is unfair that we have developed a national health care system that will finance the health care for some hardworking Americans at the expense in hours and wages of other hardworking Americans. It's fundamentally unfair, irrespective of CBO numbers and so forth. We need to correct that anomaly, which I believe was unintended, in a bipartisan way. We passed this bill with 18 Democrats supporting out of the House last Congress. My hope is that in this new era of bipartisanship, as I hope it will be, others will join, people like Congressman Lipinski, who worked with me on this language, and we can pass it not only out of the House, but out of the Senate, and I hope the President will reconsider his visceral opposition to improving our nation's health care laws. I yield back.
Can I just comment?
Certainly, Mr. Clinton.
The $53 billion isn't wages. So I suggest, if I might, that you read what CBO and joint tax. I'm sorry. It isn't wages. The $53.2 billion is essentially the cost of doing this. And let me just read in terms of the impact on part-time from the administration's statement of administration policy. While the administration appreciates the concerns that result from the current 30-hour definition of full-time work, there's no evidence that this has caused a broad shift to part-time work to date. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, since the Affordable Care Act became law, more than 90% of the increase in employment has been in full-time jobs. And over that time, the economy has added 10.8 million private sector jobs. Further, by moving the threshold to 40 hours, this legislation would cause the problem it claims to solve by greatly increasing the number of workers for whom employers may have an incentive to reduce hours to avoid the requirement. And essentially, what CBO and joint tax are saying in their estimates, and there's nothing partisan about this, that 1 million fewer people will enroll in employment-based coverage, and a number of these people will be shifted to Medicaid or CHIP or the exchange, and 500 million more or less would be uninsured. The assumption is that moving this to 40 will create more part-time workers than is true today. So essentially, as this aims to help part-time workers, this legislation would create hundreds of thousands more. That's the basis of this estimate. It's undeniable. Unless you want to challenge what CBO and joint tax have said. It's not the administration, it's these nonpartisan entities. And you've got to answer this.
Gentleman yield, I'd be happy to. I think you pointed out a very important distinction between the foregone wages and the $53.2 billion estimated by CBO to be foregone in terms of revenue associated with the employer mandate tax. Some of that will no doubt, the gentleman will perhaps concede, some of that $53.2 billion would result in foregone wages because there would be wages that would otherwise be enjoyed by that group of individuals. Let's say zero, however, is enjoyed by the employees under this scenario. Let's say $53 billion in additional employer mandate taxes are imposed
not
upon
all taxes, though.
Are imposed upon $53.2 billion in additional taxes employed upon our businesses to insure less than 500,000 individuals. Is that an efficient way to insure that group of individuals?
It's because you misstate what joint tax is saying. What they're saying is that some of this shift will go to taxpayers in this country because people will now get insurance through the exchange, many of them with subsidies, or through Medicaid or CHIP. So this bill shifts a lot, billions of dollars, to taxpayers in this country, while likely increasing more part-time workers. So what you're doing, because there is some impact, though there's no evidence of any major impact from the 30, you're shifting to 40, creating more part-time people without insurance, or with insurance which is through exchanges and Medicaid, which has some help from taxpayers. That's what you're doing. That's exactly, you can't read this any other way.
Gentlemen, yield briefly. I would indicate that if any member of Congress is under the misimpression that there has been no discernible impact in the number of part-time employment in this country, I think they need to be spending more time in their district.
No one's saying that.
Community colleges, universities, hourly workers, and so forth. We all acknowledge this is a problem. And
okay, let me just take back who's ever time. That isn't what I'm saying. So let no one, and that's what the administration, they're not saying this. What they're saying is, according to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, since ACA became law, more than 90% of the increased employment has been full-time job. And they say there's no evidence that this has caused a broad shift to part-time work today.
Well, the employer mandate wasn't fully implemented until January 1st. So perhaps that's why robust evidence hasn't been collected.
Okay, but then wait until there's data to support your position.
You know, you string together enough anecdotes, my esteemed colleague, and you start to discern a pattern. And we have seen a pattern in every congressional district in this country of people who can least afford to lose wages and earnings, lose them on account of this 30-hour provision. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. No question. Mrs. Slaughter.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Young, I know you're working very hard at it, but I think we do see a pattern. I don't think there's any question about it. The pattern is to nibble to death the Affordable Care Act. 7% of the employed people are part-time. 7%. There's been no increase in that. In fact, there's been a 2% drop. And all these experts have said to us that by doing this, you would create more part-time workers because employees would cut that threshold to 39%, which would be more. And I have just been reminded, if I may, I ask unanimous consent to put the administration's statement of policy into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. The administration is pretty clear on this, that, you know, we know the President said he would veto it. But more than 90% of the increase in employment since this act became law, more than 90% have been full-time jobs. So I appreciate you working really hard to find a solution here, but I don't think we have a problem. We're not seeing any increase in part-time. In fact, people who worked part-time who wanted full-time jobs immediately after the recession, that part has dropped 2% since the recession's been relieved, and that the economy is doing fairly well. So I appreciate Mr. Levin's statements here, and it's not something we're making up. These are experts who have done this. And Bureau of Labor Statistics, I think we've all been following them most of our lives on what they're doing. So I appreciate your being here and what you've done, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you.
But this, to me, is just the 54th time to try to kill this health care bill. Thank you.
Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Young, thank you for not just for bringing this bill forward. Well, first of all, congratulations on collecting the first veto threat of the new Congress. Up here, we're pretty used to seeing them, but we're not used to seeing the bills get to the president's desk. So unlike Mr. Levin, I look forward to the fact that the president now gets to participate in this process. I think it has been a shame that he's been deprived of the opportunity to exercise his veto pen. We will indeed get to see what the administration is made of. But one of the reasons I really want to thank you is, you're right, the employer mandate on the 2nd of July of 2013 was delayed. And so although the employer mandate began January 1st of this year, most people are unaware of it because they're not really required to do anything until next year. What they're to be doing this year is to be keeping the data, to be keeping the employment records. But so many people are unaware of what even is required because the rules and regulations coming through the Department of Treasury are still in the process. So you have done a very valuable service indirectly by requiring people to focus on the fact that this time next year, you got a big bunch of trouble to deal with. And if you're not writing it down this year, then heaven help you running your small business.
I thank the gentleman for his comments. It's interesting that so much of the feedback we've received have been from larger institutions that have the personnel to look at the regulatory environment and the legal environment. I've heard from, back in my own district, Indiana University, Ivy Tech Community College, the largest community college system in the country. I've heard from major restaurant chains and so forth. It's the small businesses that you mentioned that will discover this year, as the employer mandate goes into effect, how much this is going to impact them. And I think what responsible legislators do is, when we have a car racing off a cliff, we don't wait until we go off that cliff before we make a course correction. And so this is indeed an analogous situation, and so we're trying to preempt it and, again, relieve the pain that will be felt by so many more hourly workers before it goes, as it goes fully into effect.
Well, I'm required or requested to hold forth on what's coming around the corner with the Affordable Care Act with small businesses in my district. And I always start every discussion off, and people take it as a joke, but it's not a joke. It's, if you haven't sought professional help, you need to do so. And particularly, you're right, for the smaller business who is not cognizant of the record-keeping requirements that are in effect right now and that will affect them in a big way in a year. And Mr. Levin, during all the discussion of the Affordable Care Act the past couple of years, at one point the observation was made that the 40-hour work week was the backbone of the middle class. Was that a fair statement?
I think it is, but that is not. That's what this legislation masks. This isn't about the 40-hour week, about maintaining it.
Let me just ask you a further question.
It will diminish the 40-hour week for people.
Your state, if I recall correctly, it was probably about 100 years ago, your state was the actual instigator or initiator of the 40-hour work week, was it not?
True, but this legislation is going to reduce the number of people who have 40 hours.
And without this legislation, then you reduce the number of people who have 30 hours.
No, because there's an incentive here.
There is an irreducible minimum beyond which it does not, people are no longer incentivized to work. Your state, I think, proudly can acknowledge that they were, Henry Ford and his assembly line is where the 40-hour work week, and he recognized that it's important for people not to be at work all the time, and provided a living wage at 40 hours, and I think the country benefited from his philosophical approach. I think Mr. Young is doing good service to that by preventing us from harming it further. I just want to thank Mr. Courtney, too, for bringing his amendment. It makes a lot of sense. I hope the committee looks on it favorably. I'll yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Fox. Look, I mean, if the goal of this whole exercise today is to get the president to exercise his veto pen, then fine, and we'll go through that ordeal. But what an incredible waste of time and energy. What an incredible waste of taxpayer dollars if that's all we're trying to do here is set up confrontations. You know, I mean, you don't. I always tell people you don't have to agree on everything to agree on something. There may be some things that we can agree on, working in a bipartisan way to try to, to try to address some of the concerns that we all have. But I mean, I just the idea that the first two bills that we're bringing up were bills that have already elicited a veto threat before most committees have been constituted. I think we could probably accomplish a lot more throughout the year if maybe we try to begin with something we all could agree on, maybe get in the habit of agreeing, of coming together on things. So I regret that we're kind of, this is the way we're beginning here. And, you know, and there are some legitimate issues with the Affordable Care Act. And I think there are some reasonable answers out there, and maybe we could come to some sort of agreement on that. But I don't think this is the way to start. And I don't know, Mr. Young, whether you're here arguing for an open rule or not, but my expectation is that we're going to have two closed rules. So good ideas or ideas that are worth debating are not going to be considered. And so whether it's Mr. Courtney's initiative or I'm sure other people have some solutions here as well. But again, we don't have a committee system set up yet to deliberate. We have all these new members, which we've been all talking about, and we're going to have two closed rules. I'm just not sure that's the right way to begin. So I mean, I respect everybody's point of view here. It's just that if indeed we're all serious about trying to have a legislative year in which we accomplish things, I'm not sure this is the best way to begin. And so with that, I thank you for being here. Appreciate it. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Woodall. No. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Polis.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that it's, a new Congress, and I was hoping we could start off with some new ideas and fresh ideas rather than the 50-something repeal of Obamacare. Particularly concerned about this because it increases the deficit by over $40 billion. I hope that this isn't the tone for this Congress, just repeating everything we did last Congress again and again. Not only is it monotonous, but it's a waste of taxpayer money, and it's one of the reasons that this institution is held in such low esteem. I yield back.
Mr. Collins.
H.R. 30, Save American Workers Act of 2015. Excuse me, we are moving to the Keystone Pipeline, which is also building America's workers some number of thousands of jobs and the consumers who would benefit therein. H.R. 3, Keystone XL Pipeline. Obviously, I note that we have two gentlemen that are with us who care very much about this bill, and one who has concerns about it from Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Pallone. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to you first. We're going to have you open without objection. Anything that any three of you have in writing will be entered in the record. The gentleman, Mr. Schuster, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having me here today to discuss the rule for consideration of H.R. 3 to approve the Keystone Pipeline Act. H.R. 3 is based on the Cassidy-Keystone bill, which passed the House in the last session, 252 to 161. The Keystone Pipeline is the most extensively studied and vetted pipeline in the history of the country, and we know the arguments that have been made by both sides on this project. Pipelines are an essential part of our energy transportation infrastructure. They are the energy lifelines that power nearly all our daily activities. In fact, pipelines supply more than two-thirds of the energy used in the United States. Keystone will be a critical addition to this extensive network, increasing our nation's supply of oil, helping to reduce the cost of oil. The State Department completed its final supplemental environmental impact statement a year ago. However, there's still been no action by the administration on the pipeline. There have only been excuses, and the most recent of which is pending litigation in the state of Nebraska. However, H.R. 3 takes that into account and allows for the rerouting in that state. There is simply no further reason to delay this important project, especially given the numerous benefits it will provide our nation. The pipeline will be a tremendous boon to the economic development and one that doesn't require a single federal dollar. The very nature of infrastructure improvement creates jobs, and Keystone is no exception. The project will produce over 42,000 jobs and $2 billion in employee earnings. While some say these are only temporary jobs, keep in mind that all infrastructure construction jobs are temporary. And in fact, we have a list of unions that are very supportive of this. The Teamsters have endorsed it, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Labor's International Union of North America, the Operating Engineers, and the United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry of the United States and Canada. So this has significant union backing, and so I hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will take that into consideration. It's jobs. Again, all infrastructure jobs are temporary. This pipeline is no exception, but it will add to the economy of $3.1 billion in construction contracts, materials, and support services. And further, it will help to keep the prices of oil low, which puts money back into the pockets of working Americans. And then they can take those dollars and buy new washer machines or new cars or home improvements. So this will help the economy and will have significant long-term job creation. Further, this provides more opportunities to expand the current North American energy renaissance, which is occurring. This project will also be safe. It includes 95 special mitigation measures, including 57 recommended by the Department of Transportation to prevent spills and make this the safest pipeline ever built. And I look forward to working with all of you to move H.R. 3 through the Congress. And with that, I yield back my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you being here and for your succinct discussions. This is not your first time to be here on this issue, and we're glad that you're here. Mr. Pallone, welcome. We're delighted that you're back at the committee representing the Energy and Commerce Committee. And the gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the members of the committee, and it's good to see some new members of the committee. Although this is a new Congress, the Keystone approval bill before us is not new. The House considered this legislation in November, less than 2 months ago, under an emergency rule. And just like last time, the Republican majority will send the bill to the House floor without any committee process and probably without any opportunity for members to offer amendments. I know you haven't necessarily decided that yet, but that's my fear. My main, I really want to make 2 points here, Mr. Chairman and members, and that is a process amendment and then a substantive, a process argument, then a substantive argument. In terms of the process argument, I think this bill should be considered under regular order by the committees of jurisdiction. We should hold hearings and markups, and when the bill is brought to the floor, it should be considered under a rule that allows for amendments rather than a closed rule. Now, we mentioned the new members of the Rules Committee, we have a lot of new members in the House. I don't know exactly, I think over 60, who I think deserve the right to provide input on this proposal, and all members deserve the right to consider relevant new information on legislation to approve the pipeline. Just right now, the Nebraska, and I just use this as an example, the Nebraska Supreme Court has yet to rule on the route of the pipeline. So how do we even, deal with a bill on the floor without going through committee and hearings where we don't even know what the route is going to be because the court in Nebraska hasn't made that decision yet? Now, I know that the chairman mentioned oil prices at one point, I think you did earlier. This should not be perceived as a bill, again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but there are some out there who are saying, oh, this is so important because of oil prices, and, somehow it's going to reduce oil prices. And, we all know oil prices fell to their lowest level in more than 5 years just this week. U.S. production of oil has skyrocketed. So I'm asking you from, getting away from the process into the substance. My concern, and the concern of many of us, is that if you just go ahead with this bill, which deems approval of the pipeline, basically says we don't have to go through the environmental process, then I want to weigh the fact that there doesn't appear to be any real positive benefit to this bill in terms of, oil production or oil prices, versus the fact that now we have this very dirty tar sand supplied oil, if you will, that is going to have a major impact on the environment and greenhouse gases. Now, just to give you some statistic here, Canada projects that its greenhouse gas emissions will grow by 25% between 2005 and 2020, and that emissions from tar sands production will be the single largest contributor to that emissions growth, accounting for about a 44% increase. And all studies estimate that shifting from conventional oil to tar sands fuel substantially increases life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I know that the President and all of us are concerned about greenhouse gases. The President, both internationally and domestically, has put forward various proposals to try to reduce greenhouse emissions, but the problem is still growing. It's not, we're trying to make it less of a problem, but it's still a huge problem. So we shouldn't be, in my opinion, and I know so many Democrats agree, we shouldn't be increasing these tar sands productions of oil, which has a major impact, negative impact on the environment, at the same time when we don't really have a problem with oil supplies and oil prices at the all-time low. But beyond that, the bill grants basically deems the pipeline approval without any need to go through the federal regulatory process, environmental protections, if you will, that apply to every other construction project in the country. The President has said, I still need some time to decide whether this is in the national interest. And we have a court out there that still hasn't decided on the route of the pipeline. So why are we pushing this, automatic deeming approval of this thing with all these concerns out there? I think that it really it makes no sense, if you weigh these things back and forth, Mr. Chairman. And so basically, my opinion is, and I'll conclude, that we don't need tar sands because of the carbon pollution that comes from it. We have our own sources of oil. We're using less oil because our cars are more efficient. The pipeline isn't going to help lower gas prices or enhance our energy security or fight climate change. And so for all these reasons, I oppose the bill and requested the committee grant an open rule allowing amendments to be offered at a minimum. Thank you.
Mr. Malone, thank you very much. I appreciate your consciousness not only of being here and taking time to be a witness today, but also it's good to see you, Frank, and I hope you're going to have a good new year.
You too.
Mr. Kramer, welcome. Previously, when you've been with us, you've been on the Resources Committee. I don't know if you still are, but you're also a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I am the prime sponsor of the bill.
And that was what I was going to say, and we're delighted that you're here, and the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. And I too appreciate the issues raised in opposition to the bill and have some sympathies toward them. I think it's important for the committee to understand that prior to coming to Congress, I spent 10 years on the North Dakota Public Service Commission and carried the pipeline portfolio when we sited the original Keystone Pipeline through North Dakota, 217 miles, 600 landowners, greenfield. If they'd have hired Sakakawea to find a worse route, she would have failed them. And yet we cited it. We cited it after the presidential permit was signed. We routed it after. That's common, that the permit would be signed by the president prior to the routing actually taking place, because routing takes place not just in a hearing in advance, but it takes place literally as you're building the pipeline oftentimes, because you come across things that you didn't know were there, that the geologists didn't know, or that the archaeologists, and so the routing of a pipeline doesn't happen prior to the presidential approval. So I just want to make that point. I also appreciate the gentleman's point about price and the issue of price at the pump. That said, oil, first of all, we have to understand that these arguments are built on a false premise that somehow the oil sands aren't going to be developed apart from the United States. It's, whether they're developed or not is not our call. What is our call is, are we going to approve a process of transporting it that benefits the United States workforce, the United States economy, and frankly, the environment. Frankly, the environment. Putting tar sands or oil sands on barges and shipping it to China clearly has a greater negative impact on the climate and on greenhouse gas emissions than putting in a pipeline to the Gulf Coast. Putting it on trains has a lot of negative impacts beyond even the greenhouse gas emissions. Trucks, certainly many more. We've studied this in great depth in North Dakota. So from an environmental standpoint, it's better. With regard, though, to the price of the oil, that is a compelling reason to approve more pipelines. The difference in moving oil by train versus a pipeline is a difference of $10. Now, you have that margin, you have a little bit of wiggle room at $100 a barrel. You have none at $50 a barrel or $40 a barrel. The other thing we haven't talked about is that one of the negotiated deals between the states of North Dakota and Montana in support of this process 2,301 days ago with TransCanada was that at least 100,000 barrels per day of capacity would be reserved for Bakken crude. We now move 71% of Bakken crude by rail. We've all seen the challenges with rail. Not just safety is a major one. But 71% clogs a transportation system that is equipped and frankly required to move food to hungry people, commodities to markets around the world. So that 100,000 barrels per day of capacity freed up off of our railroads is 10 trains a week of moving food rather than oil. I'm for trains. All the above transportation is important, but 71% is an inappropriate, I think, imbalance. And so for those reasons, 2,301 days is long enough for both for the President and for Congress. We know plenty about this issue, and I appreciate the opportunity to encourage a good rule that moves the bill forward expeditiously and gets it passed, hopefully yet this week.
Mr. Kramer, thank you very much. Look, we're all products of our environment, where we're from, or our background. I remember when I was in high school, and when we had the 1973 oil embargo, we were held hostage by people who had something that we not only wanted but needed. It was the lifeblood. Energy was the lifeblood of America back then, and I don't think we've gotten a long way from that yet. As much time and technology and opportunity that comes around, we still need to have resources that are energy related. I remember when the big discussion was going on about Alaska, and there are certainly people who said, oh, they're going to ruin everything about Alaska. The caribou loved it, by the way. And the pipeline works, and like everything else, they're diminishing. Once you begin taking something out, perhaps you're into a diminishing circumstance. I think this is common sense for jobs. I think it's common sense for safety. I think it's common sense to say, if we don't take our friends up on it, somebody else is going to. We should quit giving so much money that we have to some people who we don't necessarily know how they would use that money. The Canadians are dear friends of ours. They are loyal to the United States, and I think this is a great new relationship that we would have with the Canadians. I met with a member of their parliament lately, just a few weeks ago, and he said, we want to stick with you because we think you're going to get this done. We think it's the right thing to do. Mrs. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions.
The gentlewoman yields back her time. The gentlewoman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me ask unanimous consent to put the administration policy
Without objection.
in the record. Let me just quote from it. H.R. 3 conflicts with longstanding executive branch procedures regarding the authority of the President, prevents the thorough consideration of complex issues that could bear on U.S. national interest, including serious security, safety, environmental, and other ramifications. If presented to the President, his senior advisors would recommend that he veto the bill. Then I want to welcome you, gentlemen, and ask what will happen if this were to pass and the Nebraska court would then rule that it cannot be used, will not be able to cross Nebraska with the pipeline.
Sure. So nothing in this bill supersedes Nebraska or any other local jurisdiction.
But that would kill it, would it not?
Oh,
you need to go across Nebraska. You have to use it.
At some point, just as the original Keystone Pipeline is, and Ms. Lauder, I think it's an important point, important question, and frankly, if I was routing the pipeline, it wouldn't go through Nebraska where it's going through. I suggested a much more politically palatable route several years ago to TransCanada, but they chose a shorter one. That said, I think that the Supreme Court will determine whether that route is appropriate or not, but they'll find a route either through Nebraska or around Nebraska, I suppose, at some point. But the presidential permit is not based on any individual state's routing. The presidential permit is simply determines that you can cross the international border. And there's no argument over where it would cross the international border.
Well, I understand that you're North Dakota, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That because of the fracking and drilling there, that you can now see your state from space.
Well, you raised a very
fairly
important
new wrinkle, I suppose, that you weren't planning on.
Well, I will tell you that you raised a very important point, and another very strong reason why we need even more pipeline construction, because what you're seeing from space is the flaring of natural gas, which is a secondary product from the oil. Mm-hmm. And the holdup, especially on public and tribal lands in permitting gathering lines for that natural gas, has resulted in the very unfortunate outcome of burning the gas into the atmosphere and all the greenhouse gases with it without adding any value to that gas. So that's another good reason why we need more pipelines, not fewer.
I am very much aware of Nebraska's concerns that the aquifer
yes.
that covers most of the Midwest, which really makes it possible for the Midwest to be the breadbasket for the United States, could be destroyed if there were spills from that pipeline.
Again, I'm very familiar as well with the Ogallala aquifer, and it is become sort of the main area to try to avoid, and it does cover much of Nebraska, which is, again, why I think a different route might have been better. That said, there are lots, I mean, thousands, I'm sure the chairman would know exactly how many millions of miles of oil and gas and other petroleum product pipelines there are underneath the earth, and there are safeguards in place should there be a leak, should there be an accident. In fact, I'll tell you a story about the original Keystone Pipeline. Early on, after it was running, there was a problem at one of the pumping stations that created a leak, and all the alarms worked the way they're supposed to work. The shut-off valves worked the way they're supposed to work. The Burhams held the oil in where it's supposed to be held, and they fixed it all in very fast fashion. PHMSA did a great job coming in and helping. So the
did it damage the water supply?
It did not. It did not. And this bill, this pipeline in particular, is the latest, greatest, state-of-the-art. As the chairman's testimony referenced, they have met over 50 specific recommendations by the Department of State and the Department of Transportation as a result of the EIS process. So could an accident happen? Sure, but the safeguards are there to prevent it from being worse than it could be.
I'm a great friend of the Canadian Parliament as well.
Yes.
Well, New York is, of course,
sure.
very closely involved with them. I've been hearing rumors, in any case, that they think because the price of oil has fallen so steeply, that they may not even find it practical to build this pipeline. Are you?
I think the low price of oil is more reason to build it because of the margins. The margin lost in high price will require them to move it as efficiently and as economically feasibly as possible. And pipelines are by far the most efficient as well as the safest way to move the oil. But again,
I'm
that
not
just
sure
is
how safe they are. I must tell you, I'm
sure.
not convinced at all about that.
Sure.
Nor the fact that if it is completed, it will only need 35 employees plus about 15 contractors to run it. But the major fact for us is that we're just simply being used as a pass-through. Is that correct? Most of this oil, they want to get to the Houston refineries and then put it on tankers and go elsewhere in the world, but not in the United States.
Well, as a matter of fact, it certainly passes through the United States, obviously, from the northern border
to the
all the way to the refineries, right. Which are, by the way, all of those employees at the refiners are U.S. employees. All of the restaurants and the jobs question, you can say 15 or 30 or 50 or 42,000 as the State Department states, but our economy is built on all kinds of jobs at all kinds of levels, permanent, temporary, and otherwise. But with regard to the export of the refined product, that is allowed by law, but the vast majority of this won't necessarily be exported, and nor, by the way, do I have a real problem with exporting. I think that we ought to do more of it. I think we ought to be price makers, not price takers.
Well,
the chairman would like to address that issue as well.
I say to the question, there's 2.6 million miles of pipeline in the United States today. Mm-hmm. It is by far the safest mode of transportation, especially moving the oils and some of the hazardous materials. So, as Mr. Kramer said, we should be building more pipelines, not less. The statistics show that you have a greater chance of being hurt, of being hit by lightning, than you do being affected negatively by a pipeline. Now, I've thought about offering a bill to outlaw lightning strikes, but, that doesn't happen. The only way you can say there's not going to be any pipeline accidents is to have no pipelines. And then we're going to have all kinds of other problems. So it's very safe. This pipeline, as Mr. Kramer pointed out, it's going to be the safest pipeline ever built in the history of the world, probably.
Well, I think we have to weigh the question of whether or not we want to be the conduit to get oil from Canada to the rest of the world. With the risk of what we might do with pollution. But there's one other thing in the legislation I need you to explain to me, and that is all claims against that pipeline have to be filed in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And why? Will you tell me why is that? Many people find it too difficult to get here, or to be able to pay the price of D.C. lawyers to be able to bring a claim.
We felt that they should come through the D.C. court and end up in the Supreme Court. That's the typical route.
It's just a matter to get there quickly, huh?
Well, to not get there quickly, to get there.
Well, I mean, you'd be in the same town with the Supreme Court, so you just run across the street with it. Okay.
And I'd also, to your point about moving oil through the United States, other parts of the world. There's Venezuela out there, and there's Russia today. We ought to be helping the world by getting oil to the other parts of the world, not hinder it. Well, we should do more of it.
I understand we're doing
to make
great
sure that
exporting
Putin can't
job
do
out
the dastardly things he's doing over in that part of the world.
Yes.
I would also add to that, and we're not here to debate lifting the export ban, of course, on crude oil, but right now, our drop in price, the oil drop in price, is, I think, a clear demonstration of our vulnerability yet to OPEC. And quite frankly, their ability to oversupply and drop the price comes with the very real understanding that they have the same ability to shrink supply and spike the price. And the more North American energy security we can have, the better. I just want to quote a couple other specific things. The greenhouse gas emissions from rail are 1.8 times that of pipelines. Trucks, 2.9 times that of pipeline transportation, and spills from truck transportation are 3 to 4 times the rate of spills from pipelines. So again, if it's the economy, if it's the environment that we're looking out for and safety, pipelines are definitely the way to go. And we want to be price makers, not price takers, stabilize price while stabilizing supply, and I think this is a good way to do it, as well as ensure a good trade relationship with our best friends in the world, the Canadians. And I appreciate your interest with Canadian Parliament.
I am better name.
And I'm the co-chair along with, and I'm going to miss Bill Owens tremendously in his leadership on the Northern Border Caucus. And in fact, I'm meeting with the ambassador next week. This is so important to our relationship.
I hope not, because Rob Merriweather is one of my best friends, and he understands I'm on the wrong side, or am the right side from my constituents and everybody else.
Depends on whose side you're looking at.
Indeed. Mr. Pallone, you wanted to say
Well,
something.
I just wanted to say, I listened to what to the questions and comments that you posed and the responses by our Republican colleagues, and the point that I'm really making here, going back to the process again, is, the president has basically said, because of the State Department's concerns, as well as the state of Nebraska's concerns, that we still simply need more time to study this, that the jury's out. And after listening to the debate back and forth here today, I'm more convinced than ever that that's the case. And so, the point I'm trying to make here again is that, why are we deeming this approved? This is something that needs more study.
As long as it's in court.
Exactly.
I mean, certainly.
And so I think that the very
stop it.
debate that you brought up here, Ms. Slaughter, is very supports the reason why we shouldn't be moving forward here. This is something that is not, that the Congress shouldn't be acting on without further hearings in a new session, without getting rid of the president's ability to say whether this is in the national interest, ignoring what the Supreme Court in Nebraska. We shouldn't be doing these things. It shouldn't be handled in this way. Thank you.
If I could just respond to my colleague, we've had 15 hearings in the Congress over the past couple of years on this very issue. This will be the 10th time it'll be on the floor, debated on the House floor. So just the opposite, 2,300, that's like 6 years, isn't it? It's like 6 years we've been studying this. I mean, the time has come. And again, I listen to my Republican colleague here making arguments that I hear my Democratic colleagues making all the time on the floor. Yeah. Jobs, energy, safety. So I just don't understand.
Let me just throw one thing out for you. As a microbiologist by training, master's in public health, and I know that you can't survive more than 4 days without water.
Yeah.
And anything, I think, that has potential to destroy drinking water in the United States, which is one of the reasons we fight so hard to take care of the Great Lakes, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's 20% of the planet's fresh water. And it just seems to me that that we really need to wait until certainly that the court acts and to find out what we're going to do. But I do agree with the president's action, and I really want to see.
Well, with regard, if I might, Mr. Chairman, to the process. Understanding this is the 2,301st day since the application was made, right. and this issue of the nation's interest really is the president's decision. But this body in December of 2011 passed a bill unanimously that passed the Senate unanimously that the president himself signed that said a decision has to be made within 60 days unless the president deems that it is not in the nation's interest. And I want to read a beautiful piece.
I think he has, don't you?
Well, not that I've read. I want to read a beautiful piece about the nation's interest. And this is a quote. It says, this pipeline increases the diversity of available supplies among the United States' worldwide crude oil sources in a time of considerable political tension in other major oil-producing countries and regions, shortens the transportation pathway for crude oil supplies, and increases crude oil supplies from a major OPEC producer. Canada is a stable and reliable ally and trading partner of the United States. It goes on like that for a few more lines, but I'm going to jump to the point. This quote, as much as I'd like to take credit for it, comes directly from President Obama's presidential permit in 2009 of the Enbridge Alberta Clipper pipeline that carries the very same oil sands through the country of the United States, through parts of North Dakota. I cited it as well. His same arguments are more relevant today for the nation's interest than they were then. 2,301 days, I think.
I don't see them the same way, given the fact that we are almost energy sufficient here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlewoman yields back.
Appreciate the conversation.
Further discussion, gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Yeah, it's first of all, I'm delighted that my friend from North Dakota is carrying this bill, because I don't think there's anybody with better background and more practical experience in actually doing this. But coming from a state that also thinks pipelines are sort of a good thing, I appreciate the advocacy and the expertise. A couple points I want to make. And first, why is the president involved in this decision at all?
Well, it's a great question, and the reason the President's involved in it at all is because it's crossing the international border, and therefore it requires a presidential permit.
So otherwise, he would not be involved at all.
That's
and
exactly
is
correct.
part of this pipeline already been built?
It has, in fact, the portion from Oklahoma to the Gulf Coast to the refiners themselves.
Yeah, did the President actually go down there when they opened that pipeline and hold a press event celebrating it?
He did, in fact.
I thought it may have slipped their minds at the White House as well. And are there any American-owned pipelines going through this country of Canada?
I suspect there are. But
well, isn't there something called the Alaskan pipeline where we move oil all the way from Alaska to the lower 48, which helps keep the price low for our friends? And so it's okay for America to run a pipeline the entire length of Canada with their consent and their support, but it's wrong for Canada to be able to run a pipeline through America?
I think we understate the importance of this pipeline project and these deliberations to our relationship with our friends.
I have no doubt about it, because I've had multiple conversations with people in Canada, and the hypocrisy that they see of us running oil through their country, which they have no objection to, and cooperated in, and then refusing them the same opportunity. That is, you want to call about the United States projecting a bad image and conducting a double standard in the world. This is one of them. Now, I look at the states through which the pipeline runs, and I happen to look at where the support for the pipeline is, and it's amazing to me how almost every representative and senator in the state where the pipeline actually runs is in favor of it. There's almost no opposition. So I'm delighted that people from other parts of the country are worried about our water or our environment, but we're really capable of making those decisions all by ourselves. And indeed, most of these states do it on a routine basis. As my friend pointed out, that's what you did for 10 years, were make these kind of decisions for the state of North Dakota.
No, that's exactly right. And that's why the presidential permit is confined to the point of crossing the border and the nation's interests. After that, it is up to every local jurisdiction. And by the way, not just states. It gets right down to the township level, right down to the individual landowner. All of that jurisdiction is preserved in this bill. And anyway, so you're exactly right. We can look out for ourselves just fine.
And my friend has considerable experience and background, I know, and so does my friend from Pennsylvania. I'm sure my friend from New Jersey may well as well. But with Canada as a country, is it an environmentally sophisticated and advanced country? Do Canadians care about their environment?
That is one of the other ironies that we don't talk about very often. Is that if anything, in fact, the new premier of Alberta ran his whole campaign that he recently got elected on environmental protection. It is his #1 platform plank. He was elected, and he is coming in a couple of weeks to Washington to hopefully get this thing over the line. Yeah.
If I were living on the other side of the border, I would be both mystified and I must say irritated that my country was regarded, a country like Canada, as a sort of third-rate, third-world country that doesn't care about its environment. I mean, this is one of the most advanced countries in the world. It's one of the best friends this country has had in us. We've fought together in defense of freedom all over the world. It's the largest, longest unguarded border in the world. I mean, it's a remarkable friend and neighbor to the United States of America. And it's making a request. I mean, I'd be looking and say, gosh, when you needed help moving Alaskan crude across the entire length of our country, we recognized you're a good friend. This is a pretty important thing. We worked with you. Now, when they're trying to do precisely the same thing, and in a way that, as my friend points out, will increase the energy security of the United States, will create jobs in the United States. It's not as if they make the decision, they can't run a pipeline in another direction across their territory and sell this all someplace else, creating no jobs down in Texas.
No, that's an important point. And I just might say, understanding that we are a political body, and that's real, and that the president has political considerations. That's real, and I'm sympathetic to that. I think we all understand that. And why, and getting back to process and why this process in lieu of the presidential permit, which the president could have signed any time in the last 5 years, let's look at it this way. Let's provide the president both the political muscle and, if he feels the need, political cover to do this jointly as a nation of the people's representatives, and allow and take some of that extra political burden off of him and do it together. I think we don't view things sometimes we shy away from political realities. Political realities are, why we're here. It's okay. I don't think we should apologize for them. Let's just find a way to get it done in the best way.
Sometimes issues become symbolic. The substance on this is so breathtakingly clear. Again, half this pipeline is built. We run pipelines across Canada. The transportation of oil by train and truck as compared to pipeline is night and day, safer and cheaper and better. We've got billions of dollars worth of pipeline in this country running every which way. And this is one of those issues that, in my view, the environmental community has made into a symbolic issue. It's much, frankly, my view, as the Arctic Wildlife Preserve is in many occasions. It's just breathtakingly stupid not to do this. And I think that's where the frustration comes. And it's breathtakingly unfair to one of our best friends and neighbors who has never treated us this way. And yet we're doing it to them. So I want to commend my friend for carrying the legislation and moving it along. And I think, there's a reason why this, when the American people are asked about this, and you were kind enough to stay on substance, but 60-odd% favor, 20% oppose. I mean, because they just look at it, well, it's jobs, it's energy security, it's kind of fair to our friends. And for my friends who are reveling in the low price of oil, which in my chairman in my part of the world is not always the best news, we're delighted you have it. But I will tell you this, in the oil business, and I've learned this over a lifetime, what goes up will come down and will go back up again. And if you don't keep drilling and building infrastructure now, then I can assure you, you can expect higher oil prices later. I had a friend of mine once who's in the business, and we were at a round table. We had a group of suggestions. And what could we do to lower the price? Well, you need to develop the Arctic, natural reserves. Well, we can't do that politically. Well, you need to build Keystone because that'll help. Oil's a global commodity, and when it goes on the global market, whether we're using it or not, it brings down the price everywhere. Well, we can't do that politically. That's all. Well, you need to do some drilling offshore and open up some. Well, we can't do that. And finally, this guy looks at me, and he drills in Oklahoma. He doesn't drill in any of these places. And he said, well, the next time you go to Washington, and all these people were local producers, and I said, why don't you ask those people in Congress how rich they would like us all to be? Because every time they do this, they lower the supply globally and they increase the price domestically. He said, none of us are going to make any money out of this suggestion. We're all local independent producers. We don't drill offshore. We're not drilling in Alaska. None of this stuff helps us. But if you want to constrict the supply and make everybody around the table a multi-millionaire, go right ahead. We're trying to help you solve a problem for the country. That's what you guys are doing in this legislation, and this is very counterproductive to stop. So thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was on my high horse, but this is one of those few issues that just punches all my Republican buttons. So yield back.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. McGovern, do you seek recognition?
Yeah, thank you. Just very briefly, look, I appreciate everybody being here today. Let me say I love Canada, too. But you know what? I think there are people like myself and others who have concerns about this pipeline, where those concerns are based on substance. You don't have to agree with it, but the fact of the matter is that people have some concerns. Which brings me to the point I want to make here, and that is this is a process committee. All right, as Mr. Plone pointed out, we have a number of new members. 52 new members that got elected. Committees haven't been constituted yet. Hearings haven't happened. Yes, you had hearings in the past. Fine. And if you really want to move forward with this, then at least open the process up. Allow some of these 52 members to have an opportunity to be able to, bring some suggestions to the floor. I mean, maybe there are some issues that we might be able to find some bipartisan consensus on that might address some of the environmental issues or some of the safety issues or the issue of the protection of water that Mrs. Slaughter brought up. But the idea that we're going to go to the floor with potentially a close rule and say take it or leave it, knowing that the president's going to veto it, it just seems to me that there has to be a better way to start the session off. And just finally, look, we're at the beginning of a session. We're not at the end of a session, so you can't say we got to go home for the holidays, so we don't have any more time left, or this is a must-pass bill by the end of tomorrow. Otherwise, the whole world's going to come to an end. The fact of the matter is, we have an opportunity at the beginning of this session to respect the new members who have come in, Democrats and Republicans, and have a more open process. And I hope, in a bipartisan way, that you will all suggest to the members of the Rules Committee that you don't bring a closed rule on this to the floor, that we have a process that is much more open and that allows all members to have an opportunity to debate this. We can, if it takes a day, so be it. If it takes a week, who cares? We ought to do this the right way, and I think I would hope that we could all agree on that, if not on the substance of the underlying bill, at least on the process in which we bring it to the floor. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield back my time.
I thank the gentleman very much. By the way, I'd stated earlier, we live in glass houses up here, and the gentleman's making a good point. I'd like to retort that in the 110th Congress, when Mrs. Slaughter was chairman, the Congress, in their first year of the majority, the rules package had a consideration of 5 measures. Not a hearing, not about the substance. The original day, the rules package, 5 measures. In the 111th Congress, exact same thing.
Legislation or the rules package?
They were in the original package, not an individual hearing. 6 for 6, right in there. So, we all live in glass houses. I'm not trying to call anybody's bluff. I'm just trying to say, just remember, you're trying to get your work done too.
But and we can argue. I mean, if this is all going to be about you did it, so we're going to do it.
I don't think that's not what I'm trying to say.
That's what it is. That's fine. What I tried to do earlier today, and what we're trying to suggest, is that maybe at the beginning of this new year, we change the nature of the way we do business. If the answer is you don't want to do it, fine. But the fact of the matter is that there is no reason at all for this to be brought up under a closed rule. And we could do it in a day. We could do it in 2 days. But you have 57 new members. And, we could debate whether it was the right or wrong thing to do when the Democrats did it. I'm suggesting that maybe I will in 1 second. What I'm suggesting is that what we all should do, Democrats and Republicans, is try to approach things a little differently. We might get more done. We might actually have bills that have enough bipartisan support where you might get the White House to sign a few bills. So, but if the issue is just sending things to the White House so they can veto it, we can score political points, and we're going to close the system up and it's business as usual, fine. I think it's a missed opportunity. But I think that's the direction we're going, and it troubles me very much. I yield to the gentleman.
Thank you very much. As a matter of fact, we are doing things differently. We didn't put it into the rules package. We held a hearing. We put a notice out. We had other members on a bipartisan basis. We've been here a couple hours. We're not running things through in a package. We're doing a rule. We're taking the time. We even welcome Mr. Pallone today. And he feels very welcome here. We welcome Mr. Courtney. We welcome Mr. Levin. I made sure that we were aware of what we were doing. We're trying to have a discussion, and we are going to do things differently, and I think it's better. I thank the gentleman.
With respect, Mr. Chairman, I would just say, I would prefer a little less welcoming and a little bit more opportunity to be able to deliberate on the House floor. And so, I mean, as I understand it, the rule we're going to report out will mean that if I have an idea on a way to improve this bill on the issue of safety or protecting water or any number of things, that I will not have that opportunity to be able to bring that to the House floor debated. And I think, given the fact that we have all these new members, I don't think it's a radical idea to suggest that we try it. We're not. It is what it is, and I yield back my time.
I thank the gentleman. And, it kind of goes back to where we were about an hour ago. Mr. Pallone, what your team argued is that we should tell you ahead of time that we're going to have a closed rule so you didn't have to waste your time to come up here. I think that's a darn bad idea.
No, my understanding is that you guys don't decide.
I'm making a statement to the gentleman. That's where we were going to come. And I don't think we ought to do that. I'm delighted that you're here, Frank.
Okay.
And I think you having a chance, well, you know what, it may or may not matter to some people, but it matters to me, and I think it matters to people, and I hope it matters to you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, nobody suggested that he not be welcome.
I don't think that at all. I think
that's not what the point of Mr. Hastings' amendment was. It was simply to say that for a lot of members who come up here and wait hours to offer amendments, when we know in advance there's going to be a closed rule, they ought to have the opportunity to decide whether it's worth their time.
I hope it was worth Mr. Pallone's time to be here.
Or not. And so I thank the gentleman.
Mr. Pallone, you're always welcome up here.
Thank you.
Gentleman from Florida, seek recognition?
Yes, thank you.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, first, thank you and our presenters. I perceive and believe that Mr. Pallone and Mr. Schuster are two good friends of mine here in Congress, and I'm deeply appreciative of them all the time. I'm hopeful of Mr. Kramer getting to know you better. On this subject, I would echo the sentiments of my good friend, Mr. Cole. It does appear, just listening to you, and this is the second time I've had that opportunity, that you certainly do know your subject. And I, for one, am appreciative of members who make their presentations in a manner that is not abrasive, but makes it in a persuasive manner from the perspective that you hold. I also would like to borrow from my good friend from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole, a notion of something that I believe he and I would be able to work on right away. And I've done some initial work on it. Understanding that the price of oil today, and I'm not a petroleum expert, or I don't have any stock. I used to tell people the only stock I had was in over-the-counter, and that was groceries. So I'm not in the market, and I don't understand truly the spot market and how oil is transmitted, but in a general way I do. But it would seem to me while prices are low now, whatever our, meaning the American oil reserve is, it should either be, if it is not already maximized, it certainly should be maximized, and if the potential exists and if legislation is required to increase the maximum amount of our oil reserve, it would seem to be that this would be the perfect time to do it, because we probably have about a 6-month or 1-year window before that price is going to go back up. And then regrettably, not in my lifetime, I won't get to see the full thrust of alternative energy. All of us that are advocating know that it's going to be a 20, 25, 30-year process before you will really see a lot of solar and thermal and wind and other things like that. They're in progress, but we are not getting there fast enough for me. Let me also put on the table an area that I have a measure of expertise. I don't agree with the notion of requiring the litigation to be held in the circuit court here in D.C. Article 3 courts were set up for a reason, and among them was to ensure that litigants would be able to access to the courts. And insofar as efficiency is concerned, if it's in an area that requires expedition, the courts are fully in a position to do that, whether it's at the district court level or at the circuit court level, when appropriate. Might add, there's no assurance because it's in the D.C. Circuit Court that it's going to be done rapidly either. It depends on a given day, on a given issue, as to whether or not it would even be deserving of going to the Supreme Court, as it were. I do have a question, and that is, again, following on my friend from Oklahoma, when he pointed out, I had written on my little notes that I wanted to ask how much of the pipeline has already been built, and then I heard the discussion on that. I do have an American question on that, and that is, do any of you know whether the steel that has been utilized in the building of the pipeline is American steel?
The gentleman yield?
Yes.
It certainly is. As a matter of fact, a lot of that pipeline is built in our former colleague, Mr. Griffin's district in Arkansas, but it's American steel, American products.
Right. Then that all goes well for your position. Now let me get to a stickier subject. I too have friends in Canada. I served with Jerry Grafstein, a senator. I served with in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. I served with the former defense minister and foreign minister of Canada. But we're making this sound like this is a Canadian thing. And when the argument is made about it won't cost an American taxpayer anything to build this, while I agree, then that suggests to me, knowing my Canadian friends, that there are private investors that are in TransCanada. And it's kind of ironic that they're never talked about, who they are. They're not all Canadian. Some of them are American. And I'm not grudgeful of folk who had great genetic accidents and abilities as a result thereof. But the fact of the matter is that some people that are involved in TransCanada, they are givers to Canadian parliamentarians under their particular structure, and givers to some of us as well.
The gentleman yield?
Yes.
Just by way of information, and I probably should double check this, but I'm almost certain TransCanada is actually an American company. Mm-hmm. It's actually based in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And
the investors, and
as my friend knows, there's considerable cross-border investment between Canada and the United States.
And I stay away from pointing out. I've read the articles as to who owns. And I'm not uptight about that. I do have abiding concerns. For example, the national security argument, I could flip it. If we were in other areas, for example, Putin just shut down one. He was getting ready to run across Kazakhstan. And no one has satisfied me yet as if this is so good for America, then why isn't Canada running it through their own territory, which would be their option if by chance it does not ever lift here fully operative, then they're going to wind up doing it in Canada. But I don't want to belabor the point. There are several other areas. I, too, am concerned, as Ms. Slaughter has pointed out. There will be spills. There will be concerns. I'm not sure what the Nebraska litigation is contemplating. And I hesitate because so many people are on the negative side of the endangered species arguments. I don't know whether there are any that are contemplated here or need to be. And so I'll be listening. I do want to end with just a moment of humor. We spend our time here with the Keystone Pipeline, and there's a brewery in Bruges, Belgium, that is running a beer pipeline 2 miles outside Bruges, but he wanted to keep the family business manufacturing it where it is. And I'd a hell of a lot rather be at the end of their pipeline than at the end of this one, that's all. I yield.
Gentleman yields back his time. In an effort to keep this committee hearing going, I know we've been here a long time. I would defer and ask the gentleman from Colorado if he seeks recognition.
I do,
Gentleman's
yes.
recognized.
Where is the financing for the pipeline project coming from?
If I might, quite honestly, I don't know where it comes from, except I suspect it comes from the shareholders and the administration, the executives of TransCanada, which is, I believe, a Canadian company, not an American company.
I recently read a report, and I haven't seen this disputed, that shows that the majority of the tar sands, about 90% of it, require a price of $95 a barrel, and the other 10% require a price of about $75 per barrel. Given that the price of oil is substantially lower than that, is there any evidence that this would even move forward as a construction project, even if the President or Congress were to approve it?
Well, I guess, first of all, that's not germane to this bill, obviously, because it's not our decision to make whether they build it or they don't build it. Our decision is whether it's in the nation's interest, should they build it, or if it's not in the nation's interest, that they shouldn't build it. And the reality is that then investors will make that decision, but there's nothing that precludes this from going forward based on the financing of the development of the crude oil.
Well, there's plenty of theoretical projects out there, but I hope we wouldn't be wasting Congress's time with a project that isn't feasible or isn't likely to occur. So hopefully there can be some evidence presented on the floor about whether this is even a viable project and whether anybody is serious about moving forward with this.
They haven't withdrawn the application, as far as I know.
And the market will determine that, just like these low oil prices was mentioned isn't good for Oklahoma. It's not good for the steel industry. U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh just announced they're eliminating 400, 500 jobs in Ohio and in Texas because the market's not there for the pipe that goes to the ground to explore for this. So the market will decide this, and as Mr. Kramer said, nobody's withdrawn, and I haven't heard anything at this point.
I mean, again, from the evidence I've seen here in the report, nobody who actually wants to pay for or build this pipeline that we're talking about here. So I don't know. I don't know why we're talking about it. I mean, maybe it's again a little bit of deja vu. It had been talked about when oil was $110 a barrel. Perhaps there was a more relevant discussion at that point.
Also, good news that there's no taxpayer money going into this. This is private people who are going to decide if they're going to spend it or not spend it.
Well, that's the question. Is there any private people that actually want to build this pipeline? So, I mean, again, for this to be a topic of serious debate, it would be nice to have some evidence that somebody actually wants to build a pipeline as opposed to talking about a phantom pipeline. Yield back to the chair.
Thank you very much. I've never heard a stronger argument for the cart coming before the horse. The chicken or the egg, you're not always sure. This is the cart before the horse. Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you're correct. We've observed a lot of things on this, but I do feel it's important to reiterate the part of this pipeline from Cushing, Oklahoma to Houston, Texas is built. The people have put up with the pipeline being built in their backyards, and now it's waiting for the rest of the connection. And my personal feeling is they've waited long enough. So I'll be happy to be talking about this a lot tomorrow, and yield back my time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate recognizing me, and I appreciate all the members for being here. I think this is a national security, and it's an energy security issue for America. And to the point the gentleman from Colorado made, we don't know what the price of oil is going to be tomorrow, but what we do know is there's a pending application, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to start to create a national energy policy, which we desperately need in this country. And we need secure trading partners with whom we agree on international issues. We buy a lot of oil from Venezuela and other countries we don't agree with on many things internationally. I don't know why we wouldn't want to buy our oil from a country we've agreed with since the French and Indian War. So I feel very comfortable with this. I want to thank you for all being here. I think there were great exchanges of ideas, but I think this is a great idea that needs to move forward, and I appreciate the gentleman from North Dakota for all his efforts on it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stivers. Welcome to the committee. Mr. Collins.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it. I appreciate being recognized and being here on the committee and being a part of this, because one of the things that was discussed, and it was one of my colleagues from across the dais over there, was this issue of process. I do believe this is a committee of process, but this is also an issue in a Congress of process. How much more process does this need? How many more times do we need to practice on the field when the reports keep coming back of jobs, secondary jobs, money invested? I mean, it is sort of interesting that I believe that there was no interest in this pipeline. There would definitely not be an interest in the permits. So I think the idea that it was just going to get built or not is really definitely not a concern because we're still here. The people keep coming back for this. The issue, again, it is amazing to me when we continue this conversation about moving it. Let's move it by train. Let's move it by other. The least safest way we're arguing for. I had a professor at Georgia Tech who our only argument was when we were talking about this one. Well, there's other ways in the environment we're scared of what's going to. I said, you're arguing actually to move it by a non-environmental friendly way when you can look more toward a pipeline. And that's the part that I really struggle with here as we continue on. But I just wanted to take this moment just to say, the one thing that shows process here is regulatory burden in this country. And I know we're going to, as Republicans, we're going to be talking a lot about that. The regulatory process, I am not one that says there should be no regulatory function of government, state, local, or federal, but there has to be reasonable regulatory burden. This is an example of just a massive bungling. And I just want to say also from my class, Representative Kramer, it comes with our class. It is good to see him here. His expertise has already been acknowledged from the other side. It's refreshing, especially on this issue to hear, and also, Ms. Plum, you know, the concerns on both sides. There are valid concerns, but there are also valid concerns that both Democrats and Republicans agree this is a good idea. It's time to put this on the floor. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. You know, as a young boy, I remember studying about Philmont Scout Ranch. As a young Eagle Scout, I read a lot about the outer doors and a lot of things, but I also learned about the people that were behind that. And the gentleman's name is Wade Phillips, who gave Philmont Scout Ranch the Boy Scouts of America. And he had a saying that went like this: take all the time you need, then make a quick decision. Take all the time you need. Well, I think we need to make, I think we've taken all the time we need. Now let's make a quick decision. I think that's what we're trying to do today. I want to thank all three of you for being before the committee today. I hope your time was well worth it. Mr. Chairman, I know you're busy. Mr. Pallone, I know you're busy. Mr. Kramer, you enjoy this way too much. We understood that. Thank you very much. This now closes the hearing portion of H.R. 30, Save America Workers Act of 2015, and H.R. 3, the Keystone XL Pipeline Act. The Chairman will be in receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from Grandfather Community, North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 3, the Keystone XL Pipeline Act, a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided among and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure and the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the bill shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill. The rule provides one motion to recommit. Section 2 of the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 30, the Save American Workers Act of 2015. Under a closed rule, the rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the bill shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit.
You now hear the motion from the gentlewoman of North Carolina. Is there discussion or amendment to that? Gentleman from Colorado.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order give the necessary waivers for amendment number 1 to H.R. 30 by Representative Courtney. This amendment would increase the number of full-time employees exempted from the calculation of the Affordable Care Act's employer penalty and increase the exemption from 30 to 49 employees to provide for a more rounded and pro-business way of accomplishing, I think, some of the goals of the deficit-busting version that we otherwise would face.
Further discussion? The vote will now be on the amendment from the gentleman from Colorado. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Noes have it. Noes have it. Further amendment? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The gentlewoman asks for a roll call vote. Clerk will.
Ms. Fox.
Aye.
Ms. Fox. Aye. Mr. Cole. Mr. Aye. Mr. Woodall. Aye. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Stivers. Mr. Stivers, aye. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, aye. Ms. Slaughter. No. Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern. No. Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis. No. Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman.
Indubitably, aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
That would make it EI and IO.
EIO, yeah. Clerk will report the total.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
The motion is agreed to. And the gentleman from Louisville, Texas, from the Energy and Commerce Committee, Dr. Burgess, will be handling this for the Republicans.
And Mr. Polis for the Democrats.
And Mr. Polis for the Democrats. I want to thank not only the staff, the new staff, and welcome them, but also all the people, including our great stenographers who has taken a lot of time out of their day to be with us today. This finishes the work for us for the day, and I want to thank everybody for being here. This closes the hearing.